Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my final video of the year, final one of 2024. Now, in total this year, I've made a little bit over 100 videos, like maybe 106, 107, which is crazy since it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours to put together a video. It really has been a lot of time this year, and I've come out to, about 2 a week, so that keeps up under 1 to 3 times a week, I guess. But for this final episode, I wanted to do a 2024 year in review, where I mention 10 films that I enjoyed and made videos about, which I will edit in at the end, so stick around to revisit some of those titles. 10 films I enjoyed but did not get around to making a video for. 10 shows that I enjoyed, most of which I didn't make videos for, but I wanted to at least list a good 10 of those. Podcasts, I think I only have 6 on this list because I don't really have a lot of time for them, but wanted to mention the ones that I've been listening to, especially because I came across a few new ones for me this year. And just in general, YouTube channels that I enjoy and want to pass on and try to promote, even though these people are way bigger than I am. Just, what do I like to watch on YouTube, and what can I recommend if you've been getting into YouTube more and more as a means of entertainment rather than just a quick clip here and there. So, if I didn't mention a film or show or so on, it doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy it. It just means that I didn't get around to making a video, and there were a lot of good titles this year. Too many to go into, so I just had to pick 10 and kind of keep it at that. And they are also in random order, so number 1 doesn't necessarily mean it's better than number 10. But I'm also planning on seeing Nosferatu. At the time of this video, it'll be tomorrow, which is likely to be worthy on this list, everything that I've heard about it, but at the time of this video, I haven't seen it yet. I suspect it may end up being my first video of 2025, though, so be on the lookout for that. Anyways, let's go ahead and begin with 10 films that I enjoyed, which I did make videos for. First off, let's talk about Hatchet. Now, I'm going to kind of cheat here and put Hatchet 1, 2, and 3 in this since I watch them so close together, but I was pleasantly surprised with Hatchet. It was a really interesting franchise, lots of gore, lots of comedy, interesting story, very quick runtime, and tons of really cool cameos. Coming in second is Onyx the Fortuitous and the Talisman of Souls. So dumb, so stupid, and I mean that, like I've said, in the best way. If you want some nonsense to sit down to with something fun and a strange lead character, and some Jeffrey Combs thrown in there, this one's right up your alley. Okay. Coming in at number 3 is Terrifier number 3. Somehow, in my opinion, they did it. They built this out further, and I loved it, and I can't wait to see this next installment, whether it's the final one or not. Now, coming in at number 4 is Oddity. So, this one kind of came at me out of nowhere. I never saw Caveat, which is from the same filmmaker, and I just randomly gave this one a shot, and I really loved it. It was very creepy, really spooky, definitely worth checking out. Number 5, we have Maxxxine with 3 X's there. I hope this is it. Not because I didn't like anything about the franchise, but I felt like we have a really great trilogy here with X, Pearl, and Maxxxine. They each have a very different feel. I think it's best to end it here. I think that'd be just a nice little, give me an XXX box set. I would love to get that. Right now I only have X, and I've been holding off on buying Maxxxine and Pearl because I know they've got to have that box set coming out there soon. Anyways. Moving on at number 6, we have Late Night with the Devil. Now, I always loved some Des Malchin. I really feel like he nailed it with this one. This 70s throwback style was a lot of fun. I've already watched it 3 times and own it on physical as well. Coming up next, another little cheat here, the Omen films, meaning the prequel, the first Omen, through Omen 3. Now, I'd, of course, watched the remake and the Omen 4, but I just wanted to mention those because I think this was a really good prequel, which fits perfectly within that initial trilogy, since I finally got around to seeing that trilogy earlier this year, or I guess quadrilogy, because I watched part 4 also. Anyways, I could see putting on the first Omen and Omen 1, 2, and 3, just queuing them all up in one long day. Okay, at number 8, a really strange one, I Saw the TV Glow. Such a strange film, which one would think a straight guy wouldn't be into, because of the kind of themes within it, but I was. And it was shot wonderfully, it is tragic, it is gorgeous, and I'm awaiting my Blu-ray coming in direct May 24th. Then we have Abigail. This one is a real breath of fresh air because it was just fun, bloody vampire action. Not scary at all, which is fine. It has this comedy and a great cast, great characters. It's a good standalone film worth checking out. And finally, at number 10, The Substance. not only gross when it comes to like the body horror aspects and you know, twisted when it comes to, well, like to save from any spoilers, the young versus old stuff, but an important film when it comes to ageism and sexism in Hollywood. Okay, so remember to stick around towards the end for some videos about some of those titles, about all those titles actually, or check in the description, you'll see time codes for each one. Makes it a lot easier. Anyways, so now 10 films which I enjoyed, but I didn't get around to making a video for. Some were new and some were only new to me. So starting off, you might get some hate, Trap. I don't know what it was. I actually really enjoyed Trap. It did get a little bit of hate out there. This is an M. Night Shyamalan film starring Josh Hartnett about a serial killer who is trapped at a concert venue as law enforcement's closing in. He's trying to find a way out with his daughter, who he brought to the concert. A really cool idea. Goes beyond that venue more than I expected. Definitely a lot of fun. Number 2 is Smile number 2. I was not interested at all because I thought Smile was a good self-contained kind of film. I left it open for sequel, but I was completely satisfied with part 1. Didn't need a part 2, but this one was good. I feel like they upped everything from part 1. They gave us a longer runtime, made it a little bit more complex what was going on. This time focusing on a pop star. It really felt like it added without padding things or retracing old or previous steps too much. Okay, then we have Alien Romulus. I actually just received this one on Christmas on physical media. So somehow they did it where after Prometheus and Covenant being so much more philosophical and dramatic, they got back to those thriller roots of Alien and the action roots of Aliens in this. I thought it was a really cool way to continue this on without making a direct sequel to one of the last films. They just kind of shoved it in there between Alien and Aliens. Good stuff there. One that I've been wanting to watch for a while here, Hush. So I finally got to see this one. You know, I never got around to see it when it was on Netflix. It was one of their releases. They took it down. It had no physical release. Couldn't find it anywhere. But the rights have been restored. I think I watched it on Shudder, and it's got a physical release coming soon as well. Actually, I think it's already out, which I definitely intend to pick up. Really cool story about a deaf woman working on a book and a home intruder by the guy who brought you such things as Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Midnight Club, Fall of the House of Usher, which I did a video for. Okay, one of the strangest ones, I would say, Enter the Void. This is an older one from like the early 2000s, I want to say maybe 2008 roughly. I scooped it up on Blu-ray pretty cheap, not knowing anything about it. It's from the same filmmaker as Irreversible, which was pretty dark. But yeah, it's twisted, dark, drug-fueled, dealing with afterlife and existence. It's hard to explain. It's a little bit long, but definitely worth checking out. This is a big mainstream one again. Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, it felt like the end of the X-Men franchise. Now, while this film doesn't work on its own, similar to like Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home, in that it relies on several years worth of films before it to make that story work. If you are up on Marvel and X-Men, it's really great. It's, to me, a great third and maybe even final Deadpool film. We'll see what they want to do with it. Another one that almost went by me, Godzilla -1. This is one I just wasn't interested in. Nothing against Godzilla, it's just there's been so many films over the years that I get them all mixed up, especially with the Godzilla vs. Kong stuff and the King of Monsters and all. I just got this mixed up, and I started seeing these reaction videos being posted, and of course I couldn't watch it because I never saw the movie. So I decided if everybody's making these reaction videos and reviews on this, maybe I should give it a chance, see what all the fuss is about, and I was pleasantly surprised. It was really good action, really good effects, great storyline, and it was very dramatic, and they left it open for a sequel, so I'll be on the lookout for that. These are getting a little bit long-winded here, so I'll do a quick one here for The Entity, one which was hard to track down, but I found it on Blu-ray used, and I'd been meaning to check it out since the 7th grade, when I believe I saw it mentioned on the Fangoria documentary Scream Grades Volume 2, Satanism and Witchcraft, which set such an impression on me that I still have it on VHS. But definitely creepy, spooky stuff, supernatural horror. And not spooky or scary at all, really, is Beetlejuice. It's been kind of hit or miss with people. I think it was a really fun follow-up to the original. My only real issue is that Monica Bellucci's role was a little bit short, tacked on, not really needed. I really wanted more of her. but instead her portion seemed a bit too short to not really, it doesn't really matter. It could have been cut. But no matter what, still the film was fun. It had a similar feel as the original. It was a bit more open than the original. And I just can't believe that after decades of fan posters, we actually had the real sequel come out. And speaking of sequels to old things, this will probably get me the most raised eyebrows here, was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I know, many didn't care for this one, but it felt like that introduction to this core cast in the previous film had kind of made this one work, and that they could just throw us right into it, expand a little bit without having to start over with yet another origin story. And I'm really hoping for at least one more in that Ghostbusters series with this cast. Okay, so that was a lot already. Now for some TV shows, which I will include, because there are a few that I made videos for, which will be included at the end of this. Starting off, one that I do suspect I'll be rewatching, like binging next Halloween time, is Hysteria, an 80s satanic panic with Bruce Campbell. What's not to like? It's currently on Peacock. Dispatches from Elsewhere, revisiting this one twice this year, once on my own and once in a day-long binge with a friend. It's definitely been a real treat. It was one of my poorest performing videos, though, since it came out 5 years ago, it was a single season show and was not all that popular at the time, but I still really enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite shows in recent years. Then the sad one here, Reginald the Vampire. You know, I love this vampire comedy, but sadly it was canceled on a cliffhanger before season 3. So if interested, it is worth checking out. Just know that at the end of season 2, they wrap up most of the loose ends, and then they have about an episode and a half left, which they take that to lay out some groundwork for the next season, and a nice cliffhanger. And that's where they cancel it. But watching it up to that point, or at least understanding ahead of time that you're not going to see that resolution, I still think it can be enjoyed. Another vampire one here, What We Do in the Shadows. We had a great final season on a show, which I will sorely miss. Based off the film, I would suggest check out the film, and if you like it, go on over to Hulu, or at least in the US it's on Hulu. Go on over there and check it out. Also, and I have, this is actually one of his blankets here, The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. Now, of course, this wasn't new to me. I've been watching this for years, but this year, aside from their usual double feature specials, and they had the one big night marathon, which I think was 6 movies, besides those, they'd changed their format to just being one film per night every other Friday, but for more installments than usual. This was nice because you get that one film out of the way earlier in the night. Most of the time I couldn't really stay up that late for the second film, but it was a really great format for it. And for those unfamiliar, before you see my video for it, which is very dated and old, we got the host Joe Bob Briggs, who is hosting these old horror movies and stuff to check out. Also, Solar Opposites, a Hulu show which few seem to know about or talk about. It's been on for a while. Involves aliens landing on Earth and trying to get by and take over the planet, by the creators of Rick and Morty. Very rated R, very silly. Definitely worth checking out. Another animated one here in the sci-fi realm is Star Trek Lower Decks. Just like What We Do in the Shadows, we just had the final season on this. It's on Paramount Plus. It's cartoon Star Trek based in the Next Generation time frame, for those familiar with Star Trek. Great comedy, Star Trek meets Family Guy. Doctor Who, specifically this new Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa. Personally, I think he's doing a great job. He's got a lot better scripts than his predecessor ever did, and I just watched a Christmas special, which I also really enjoyed. We also had Agatha All Along, a surprisingly good Marvel spin-off of WandaVision. Another one I wasn't all that interested in, but really it was a lot of fun. My only complaint, like with a lot of these Disney Plus shows, the episodes are too short. It'll say it's 40 minutes, but they'll give you an 8-minute credit block at the end. But I know when it comes close to either next Halloween, or maybe if they get a season 2, I could binge this entire thing in about 4 hours, maybe 5. So I could definitely see doing that one day. And finally, Only Murders in the Building. I think it's season 4 or season 5. I forget what number they're on, but Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez. It doesn't sound like that should work because, you know, we've seen Steve Martin, Martin Short, but somehow they have great chemistry with Selena Gomez, plus everybody else that they've brought in. A lot of hard hitters here, a lot of great performances. It shouldn't work, but it does, and it is a lot of fun. It was fantastic, as always, and this most recent season was a real treat. A little bonus here, doesn't really count it, but I've been revisiting key episodes of Star Trek Next Generation with my son. because he had already done key episodes of the original series, then we did all those movies, then we did key episodes of Next Generation. We just finished watching all of those movies, and now we're heading on to Picard. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of Star Trek this year. Okay, we are closing in, and we have a shorter list here for podcast. You know, I don't listen to every single episode. Some of them run long, or it's about a topic or a person I'm not that interested in, but I've listened to these enough that I always look forward to when they are presenting a new episode. The first one, I would say, is Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard and Monica Padman. I've been listening since about their first week, I believe, and I always enjoy it. If you look at one of these pics here, you can see a gift that I sent to Dax last year. He mentioned not being able to find Valley Girl on streaming from time to time, so as a joke, I sent him a VHS copy of it. I don't just send, VHS copies of movies to anybody out there. So that should tell you how much I really enjoy this podcast. Now another one, more along the lines of what my channel usually focuses on, is Scream Dreams. Catherine Corcoran, Barbara Crampton, crush of mine, and James A. Janice, kind of interviewing people in the horror community. I didn't hop on this one till about May, and I've gone through a lot of the older episodes. It's really good stuff. If interested in horror, it's a must listen. Along with this other podcast, Colors of the Dark. So speaking of horror, we've got Rebecca McKendry, one of the writers, directors of All the Creatures Were Stirring, and Glorious as well. I've seen her in a lot of documentaries. So anyways, they did a video for All the Creatures Were Stirring. You can find that one by doing a search. But she hosts this with Elric Kane, discussing all things horror, which means film, TV, books, even video games. And with books, I mean also graphic novels. So while working on some stuff here at home, I actually put on like 4 episodes of theirs in a row, doing a lot of manual labor here. So I got to hear like year-end lists from 2023, 2022, and a lot of other stuff. But I've basically, because of listening to them, it's a great way to get suggestions for other horror films. And I think my list now is so long that I will never be able to catch up thanks to those two. Now speaking of Armchair Expert earlier, one of the spin-offs from that show, Flightless Bird, used to be under that umbrella. Now it's kind of branched off on its own. This spin-off from Armchair Expert is from David Farrier, a New Zealander who became stranded in the US, where he goes over several topics, particularly American, so he can try to wrap his head around those differences between the US and New Zealand. And then we also have The Sackhoff Show. Katie Sackhoff, known best probably as Starbuck on the most recent iteration of Battlestar Galactica, and Bo-Katan in The Mandalorian. Celebrity guests, interesting insights, and she's really funny as hell. And finally, speaking of celebrity ones, Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum. I've been listening to this one for years. He's probably best known for portraying Lex Luthor in the show Smallville. Similar in format to Sackhoff Show, but he dives a lot deeper into like mental health aspects, where some of the episodes sound almost like a therapy session in a way. I've been listening for years, and he had another great year. Okay, finally, here we are at the end. The pay it forward kind of entry, or just to let people know what I actually do on YouTube, what I listen to. So this is what takes my time. I figured I'd pay it forward to some of the common channels that I check out. Of course, there's a lot more. And there will be links to every one of these channels within my description, so be sure to check them out if interested. So, number 1 would be Cinebinge, and again, this isn't in order of quality, just mentioning Cinebinge number 1. Reaction channel by 2 Canadians, George and Simone, where they react to and chat about several films and shows. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm often eagerly checking out their newest uploads. They have great chemistry, commentary, and humor. This year, I believe it was this year at least, George brought his father in for a few videos, having been in the Chinese military. He got to have his father's input on films like Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. At least I think that was this year. Then Cinepals. Now this one's been around for a while, and I've been watching it off and on for a while, but this year in particular, they had some really great reactions to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and one of their reactors going over Marvel content has really been amazing. Now one that's a little bit more informative, not related to reactions, is Minty Comedic Arts. I know I've mentioned him a few times on the channel. Great info and top 10 lists about film from a comedic Aussie. Even films I'm not particularly interested in learning learning about, he somehow finds a way to make it funny and informed and definitely worth checking out. Now when it comes to music, a nice one I've had on in the background a lot is Jonathan Bell. He does music reactions, synthwave remixes, puts these larger mixes together that I have on a lot of the time while I'm working. And also informative would be Simon Whistler. So Simon Whistler isn't a channel per se, but he's a person. He hosts several channels such as Brain Blaze, Astrographics, which I think just had their name changed to something else, Side Projects, Decoding the Unknown, and so forth. He's all over the place with these different infotainment kind of videos that are very informative, funny, and they can get a bit addictive. As far as other informative stuff, we also have Star Talk. Neil deGrasse Tyson and co-host Chuck Nice talking about everything in the cosmos, and I actually got to meet him earlier this year. Got to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson when he was in town. Now we come to See Jane Go TV. This is the first reaction channel I ever got into when I came across some Doctor Who reactions from them. Two Canadians. They seem to, like, YouTube always sends Canadians my way. Jane and JV, nicest couple on YouTube, really sweet couple, I would say, who create some really great content. And JV even has his own side channel, JV Galactic, which I've checked out a lot on that. The focus is a little bit different and it's just him doing it. And they even have a personal / vlog channel where we just get some smaller bits of just interesting stuff going on in their life and with their family and everything. And then we have P-Reviewed, which I always say it like that because that's how I have to type it when I look for it, but Previewed. Adam and Jay, who I believe began with reviewing and reacting to trailers. Now they're working in more films these days to go along with some of the TV shows. They also have side content involving gaming. A hilarious duo from the New York area, I believe, and great takes on the content that they cover. And while I don't have time to put in clips from every channel that I want to mention here, there is one from the end of Abigail that I wanted to include here. So to set up this clip, before we dive into it, they were making fun of an actor in the film Abigail who seemed like a rapper who's trying and failing miserably. And they made comments about wanting him to die, wanting him to be killed off first. And this was the result. Well, first off, this was some of their comments about him, and the result of what happened at the end of that video is just hilarious.
Weapons, drugs.
Who is this guy?
He's really...
Who?
Let me get a piece of that candy.
This guy has the vibe of I'm a rapper that you've never heard of, and I'm making an acting play.
Okay.
Who's Angus Cloud?
I don't know.
If the person that died is the person that I was clowning on the entire time for being a bad actor, I swear to God.
Do you want me to look it up real quick?
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! You have got to be kidding me.
So, now we got casual nerd reactions. This guy Chris is awesome. His journey through Doctor Who has been very addicting. I've seen a lot of his other films and TV show bits and pieces here and there. Definitely good stuff. And finally, Funny Little Gal Reacts. Angela is another awesome one, another real sweetheart and everything. I think I really started my addiction with her channel when she was going over Firefly and Serenity last year, I believe it was, unless I came to it late and saw it this year. But it's really continued on. And she just got married, so congratulations to her. Okay, so that's it for my top 10 content, top 6 for podcast. And as stated, there will be some videos stitched in shortly. There should be some chapters available as you're kind of fast forwarding around, hopefully. If not, down in that description I have exact time codes, so I've just put in the video where if I mentioned it, you can click on it right there to fast forward to that part of it. But at any rate, that's it for 2024. It's come to a close. A very busy year. Lots of stuff going on, both on the channel and in film and in my personal life. Going into 2025, I'm still going to try to get into some longer, more detailed videos that aren't quite as much surface level on just whether or not you should watch it, but we'll dive into what I like about it, why I like the film. Just like before, where I have a quick surface level, then I have my spoiler section before wrapping it up. I'm going to try to get back into that more, but we had 2 hurricanes throughout our end of the hurricane season here. Really threw a monkey wrench into things. At one point I had 5 people, I guess 6 if I count my cat, staying over here in a 2-bedroom apartment for about a week. Some of them, it was only 2 days, some were 5 days, some were 6, because of power being out in the area, trees falling into houses, flooding issues. It was just crazy. But definitely want to get back into stuff this year. I'm still going to keep up with doing a minimum of 1 a week, possibly as many as 3, usually on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Friday being the one I do all the time, Monday and Wednesday, depending on what there is to post. So if you are not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and hit that little bell icon wherever it's going to be here to get notifications for when I put up that new content. Be sure to share stuff. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for sticking around to the end. And if you are new to the channel or somebody who's been on for a while, thanks for coming by this year and checking out my content. And that's about all I got for this one. I think my brain is fried, but I will see you in 2025. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to another franchise review here. Now, as I stated in my September channel update, I am looking to switch the franchise reviews from, instead of doing one video for each film in that series, just doing one video for the series as a whole. At least that's what I plan. There is one franchise that I do plan on doing a video for that is quite long, that I may have to split up into 3 different entries. But anyway, sticking with that idea, this latest franchise review, I'd recently checked out the Hatchet franchise, which started way back in around 2006, 2007, and has seemingly ended in 2017 with the final installment. So needless to say, I am a bit late on this one, but you know, I'd heard this name for years, that there was this other slasher franchise that was definitely worth checking out. A nice replacement ever since the Friday the 13th kind of reboot they tried to do. It kind of fizzled away and nothing had really come of that. But you never know with some recommendations. There may have just been a lot of nostalgia behind it, or maybe a very small niche that was being filled that was really getting a lot of notice. But anyways, I was still interested. And then last summer, when I ran across Victor Crowley on Blu-ray, really cheap used, kind of reminded me to get around to checking this out. So we just started collecting some used copies of these films since I heard such good things about them. But before we dive in, just what is this franchise about? Well, since I'm covering several installments, I'll just start with the brief overall synopsis of how everything begins, which is, in a Louisiana swamp, a group of tourists get stranded, lost, and encounter Victor Crowley, the bayou butcher who is hunting them down. So it's a very simple slasher setup, which is fine. I'm all for simple, pure evil, slashers kind of slash, but there are 4 of these films, with the final installment simply being named Victor Crowley after the name of our slasher. And really, I'd heard enough. I was ready to check them out, so I sat down with them a few weeks ago as Hurricane Milton was literally bearing down on me that day, just kind of passing the time. So as we dive in, as usual, this will be relatively non-spoiler. I usually will save some time at the end for spoiler info, but there's really not much that I would want to worry about with that. Just want to give an overall feel about what this franchise is, what these entries are like, and are all 4 of them actually worth checking out. So as the basic outline goes, we have tourists go to a swamp, their boat breaks down, this killer in the area is now after them, killer eventually is defeated, finds a way to come back for part 2, is defeated again. Then there's another way that he comes back for part 3 where they expand upon the how, like how does he find a way to come back, before finally being finished off at the end of part 3, only to have him come back once more in a very loose way for part 4. So needless to say, there are some supernatural aspects of this that kind of come into the reasons why. Like, why is he able to come back? And can we use some of those reasons as a way to seemingly finally have taken him out in part 3? But and though this will be a quick review, which may make it seem like this film is a bit simple, that's only because these films are pretty simple. They are really simple and short. Most of them are only about like 80 to 85 minutes. Sweet spot for slashers, in my opinion. But it works really well in the way that they have kind of laid this out. Just a simple setup, short runtime, and then we're off to go with the story. Which, even though that story is a bit simple, you know, there isn't much really needed to get these films going and to get you on board with the situation. What makes these films for me, why I really actually ended up enjoying all of them, well, most of them for the most part, were, at least for those first 3, were because first off, the cast. We do have some really great players in this, whether it's a quick scene or cameo or to a larger role. We have the likes of people such as Robert Englund, Kane Hodder, Felissa Rose, Tony Todd, rest in peace at the time of this video, who just passed away a few days ago, Danielle Harris. We even get Tom Holland, no, not that Tom Holland, that Tom Holland, of course, and you know, he's the one who kind of created my favorite vampire film franchise, and so many more just pop up in this film. So we really get a great cast and everybody holds their own. Second, is the humor. You know, this film, this entire series never really takes itself too seriously. They're always throwing in some corny stuff here and there, even when it comes to those kills themselves. And third, the kills themselves. As mentioned, they are over the top, brutal, and gory. But what makes this kind of violence and gore kind of stand as being quite different from something such as, let's say, the Terrifier films, is that they are intentionally over the top and very comedic because of that. So while they're gross, they're also laughable at how outrageous and unrealistic these kills are. It makes it a lot of fun. And finally, as mentioned, you know, the run times of these films being only 80 to 85 minutes. They're quick, to the point, they don't drag on, and so on. So we get some quick fun slashing going on, and an interesting story in that there is this kid, deformed, growing up secluded with his dad in the woods. It's an accident that's happened. Now as he's older, he's out there killing people. There's a lot more to the story which does unfold throughout those first 3 films as we get some other flashbacks involving more stuff about his father, local bullying, witchcraft, and curses, which, you know, lead into why he can be seemingly dead only to come back again. And throughout all 3 of these films, everything is a lot of fun. Notice I'm saying 3 because I got some stuff to say about that 4th one in a moment. It felt almost like watching the new episode of a show, with some new characters kind of thrown in here and there. Excited to see some new kills and jokes thrown in, or just to see how are they going to bring him back and supposedly kill him off for good. But while parts 1 through 3 I would absolutely recommend checking out, a little warning about part 4, Victor Crowley. So this one just didn't really work for me that well. You know I only like to make videos about, you know, film that I enjoy and like to share, but you know, this one, it kind of falls into that caveat of when I'm doing an entire franchise, I will make a video about some entries that I didn't really care for. You know, and I felt like with part 3, they had a perfect ending. They found the real supposed how to do it. How do you really kill him? When it came to, you know, killing him once and for all. It was done, completely done. So finding a way to bring him back definitely seemed unneeded at that point. And, you know, I pretty much had what I wanted from parts 1 through 3. I was ready to leave it as that trilogy. But, you know, besides their loose way of kind of bringing him back in part 4, the entire tone of the film really shifts, you know, which is to be expected when you see that one of the cast members is from the Impractical Jokers. But the comedy is what does this in even more than how they bring him back. You know, while all 3 did have a lot of comedy thrown in there, this one pushed it a little bit too far. And I felt like where the first 3 had a feel that they were maybe doing some slight parodying in certain aspects of other slashers, which came across like a celebration of what slashers were, as if they were saying, you know, remember all the fun these films were over the decades, let's kind of make one of them too and have some fun with it. I felt like with part 4, they were almost parodying themselves. It's a little, I don't know, anything that was previously taken seriously seems to be wiped out in favor of just crazier and crazier humor. And that comedy being so over the top there, that even to the point where at the beginning they're showing a flashback scene with Jonah Ray, it came across so silly that I really thought that it was going to pan out and show that they were actually watching a movie based on the killings in the swamp, similar to the stab films in the movie Scream, if that makes any sense. But no, it was exactly what the story is. They were leaning into the humor a lot more, and that part of it just didn't really work with me because it made part 4 feel like a joke that was going on too long. But it's not all bad, you know, while part 4 may not be for me, I still got the sense that it was like watching a party that these filmmakers were kind of throwing as a group of friends wanting to bookend this franchise with some really silly stuff. So I can respect that, even if I didn't really enjoy that entry myself. But I mean, 3 out of 4 is really not bad. That's excellent, actually, when you think of, you know, hit versus miss in some other franchise. I mean, I look at ones like the Hellraiser franchise. They got so many of those, and I think there's only 3 or 4 out of that entire group that I even enjoy. But, you know, at least with this one, I get 3 really fun slashers out of this franchise, you know, where the story's well written, the kind of film that they wanted to, you know, for the kind of film that they wanted to make, and the runtime being where they wanted it to be. Where I watched 2.5 of these in one day, where the second half of part 3 I had to wait until after the hurricane had passed because it knocked out my power during it. But I was just going right from one film into another until that power got knocked out. The acting is just fine for what kind of content they're trying to, bring across, and you really buy into the characters. Special effects work really well for all the kills, which are not, which are all crazy and over the top. But honestly, the first three at least are just a fun ride, which are more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out my admittedly rambly kind of video here about the Hatchet franchise, which though I had scooped them all up on Blu-ray, they are available in Tubi. I believe they have all of them there. They are also split up over some other streaming providers as well. Also, while I ultimately didn't enjoy Victor Crowley, I may give it a second chance one day, knowing what I know about it, going into it for a second chance viewing. Or it may be right up your alley, especially if you go in expecting that change in tone. But anyways, that's all that I have for this quick entry here. Remember, these Hatchet films are a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is 1 to 3 times a week. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you on the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody, and happy Halloween, or technically that was yesterday. I'm just recording this on Halloween. Yeah, this month just flew by for me. For me it was because of the 2 weeks keeping an eye on, prepping for, getting through, and dealing with the local aftermath of Hurricane Milton. Next thing you knew, I'd lost about 2 weeks there. But as we have wrapped up October and I finished with the supercuts and compilations, I wanted to bring in another standalone film here, which I came across when catching up on some of the back catalog episodes of Scream Dreams podcast that I just came across, been around for a while, which I will link to the specific episode at the end of this video, so be sure to stick around for that. But they were interviewing Andrew Bowser, the writer, director, and star of Onyx, the Fortuitous, and the Talisman of Souls from 2023. Which aside from him also stars Jeffrey Combs, and we even get an appearance by Barbara Crampton, so we get this Reanimator / From Beyond kind of reunion happening there. But what is this strangely titled film about? Well, the synopsis is as follows. Fledgling occultist Onyx and a group of worshippers attend a once-in-a-lifetime ritual at their idol Bartok the Great's mansion. So, the core of this story is the character of Onyx, meaning he isn't just the star of the story, but he kind of sets the entire tone for the entire film. Now, he's a bit of a loser, treated badly at his job in fast food, still living at home, to the point where he still has all of his toys and childhood decorations and such up in his room. And he even carries around a little lunchbox with him when he's traveling to this mansion. His focus is mainly on the occult and fantasy, and he's not grounded in reality at all. So, entering this contest, of which the prize is, this trip to this mansion to take part in one of his idols, Bartok the Great's rituals, is right up his alley. We see a bit of his home life here with his mother, played by Barbara Crampton, her partner, who he really clashes with quite a bit, and how his job is. It's messy, they're disrespectful to him, the customers really treat him badly, and so on. And we get the sense that he really just needs to kind of get out of this rut that he's in, and this contest is a huge opportunity for him that he's extremely excited about. Now, of course, in on this journey are the other contestants of varying backgrounds, but with similar interests, whether dealing with loss, as one does, turning to the occult, or one who is out for power and fame of sorts, or maybe just one who's kind of interested in like a scholarly way of the occult, and so on. Each one of this group are very distinct, and everyone even gets kind of like sorted in a way, like kind of like sorted into these roles of like who they supposedly really are. But we have like this kind of ditzy one who's very intelligent, one who's just kind of like the cool one who's definitely sexy and manipulative, and then we have Onyx, the kind of out of sorts and nervous one of the group. But shortly after their arrival at this mansion, we get this idea that, as expected, this idol of theirs, Bartok the Great, played by Combs, is up to no good and is kind of simply out to use them for one of these rituals. So we get this unfolding of strange events at this mansion as our characters work their way through this creepy little mystery to discover exactly what's going on. Kind of Scooby-Doo-like in a way. Pretty light stuff, straightforward, and is definitely one of the silliest and dumbest movies I've seen in a while. And I mean that in the nicest way when I say dumb. It is not to be taken very seriously. It's just a lot of fun. But with that said, it wouldn't necessarily be everybody's bag. You know, a major part of the comedy behind this is Onyx in and of himself. The entire way he carries himself, the way that he reacts, his vocabulary, and especially the way that he speaks when he uses that vocabulary. His line delivery is like a strange mix of perhaps carnival barker mixed with a teenage girl stereotype with a slathering of D&D nerd on top, perhaps. And that may be an issue for some. You know, some may find him kind of tough to deal with and not finish the movie, but stick with it as it's worth kind of getting used to it and just getting into this absurdity. I believe he said during the interview in this podcast something along the lines of how when he's seen negative comments about his film, it often centers on the character kind of being annoying. And that's the whole purpose of this character. And I can get that. And, you know, that somebody may feel like it's a joke that's gone on too long, but personally, I enjoyed it because it always kept everything very light, a lot of high energy, and kept everything on track. Now, and as for that lightness, you know, that silly side of it, this film has a very strange look from how it is designed in general down to some of the special effects, both digital and practical. The best way I can describe this look and feel is that it's light in a way that like something on maybe the Disney Channel might look. Either like Wizards of Waverly Place, or especially another older title that I used to watch with my son years ago around Halloween called Girl vs. Monster, with a dash of Beetlejuice and Hocus Pocus on top. We have the dark, spooky feel, but brought across in a way which is filled with more lighthearted humor on top of that. Haunted Mansion versus Haunting of Hill House. Zoo Tampa's Creatures of the Night versus Busch Gardens Howler's Scream. Or Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween versus Universal's Halloween Horror Nights. This weird kind of mix. So I think that's enough analogies there. Anyways, but like Onyx himself, even that look and feel, that overall vibe may turn off some viewers who wanted something darker on this. I mean, there is some dark stuff in here. There's definitely some adult humor going on, but it's not a kid's movie. But if one goes in wanting something a bit darker and humorous, kind of like along the lines of maybe John Dies at the end, another one which I did a video for, which I'll link to at the end, like darker, more serious side to go with the humor, they might be a bit disappointed on how this is presented. So if you go in, you know, with this one, I won't bring any spoilers into it, but so it'll be a little bit short. But honestly, even if I had laid out that story, I don't think it would really spoil anything, because any of these reveals are pretty heavy-handed and teed up really well, so that you can really see them coming, and not in a bad way, you know, just in a way that it keeps everything quick, to the point, and slaps you with a joke at every chance that it gets. But all in all, when it comes down to it, it's the character of Onyx himself and how he handles his situation and that humor thrown in, that whimsical side of things, which make this a strange, silly, spooky kind of film to watch with friends around Halloween time, perhaps, as it's more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest quick little video here for Onyx, the Fortuitous, and the Talisman of Souls, which at the time of this video is available on Amazon, Tubi, Hoopla, Vudu, paid rental. It's all over the place at this point. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. Like I said, if you go in just understanding this is going to be very silly up front, I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. Don't really take it too seriously. It's just really a blast. But anyways, thanks for coming by and for sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit. Thanks for sticking with the channel through the hiatus in September and the hurricane delays in October especially, and for checking out those supercuts and compilations of my older content, which I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, please give this video a thumbs up, and if not already subscribed, please consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications when I put up new content, which is typically 1 to 3 times a week. And I'm still working on finding some good like Christmas related horror or some Christmas 80s throwbacks that I don't hear much about these days. I can make some more videos about that coming soon, and the subscribe and bell will definitely help keep you up to date on those. Anyways, that's all I got. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to an entry which I'm a little bit late to, as Hurricane Milton had put a delay on me getting out to actually see this film, which is for Terrifier 3, which was just recently released to much anticipation and even much more success. If you've been with my channel for a while, you may have seen my Terrifier 1 and 2 videos. If not, I will link to both at the end, so be sure to stick around for those. But basically what these films are known most for is Art the Clown, very creepy, and being very gory and intense, making some people very sick to where they even walk out of them. Now, in my previous videos about Terrifier, I focused on if there's more to these films than simple gore and shock value, which, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen those two videos of mine, there is. You know, in those first two films, they did a really great job of balancing the story with the scares and with the gore. Honestly, my only complaint as I revisited part 2 was that it is a little bit long, running at about 2 hours and 18 minutes. A little bit longer than that sweet spot that's usually no more than 80 to 100 minutes, but there isn't really much that could have been cut out of part 2. You know, they'd really laid the groundwork for a lot, they really built the story out a lot, added this supernatural aspect. Maybe you could cut 10 seconds here and there from certain scenes, but what are you going to say, 3 minutes maybe by the end of it? Really not worth it. But that was my only issue. But now the question is there even a reason for part 3? You know, is it balanced? Is it interesting? Is it worth even going out to the theater to see this? Well, before we dive in, as a reminder, I will begin this video as non-spoiler, a little bit vanilla, just some simple info on the top layer about what to expect should you decide to check this out. And then later on in the video, I will put up this banner here to let you know that I'm about to go into some more detail, which may, you know, have some spoilers. So, let's begin with the synopsis for this newest installment here, which is as follows. Art the Clown is set to unleash chaos on the unsuspecting residents of Miles County as they peacefully drift off to sleep on Christmas Eve. Now that is a bit simple there, you know, but for some more info, we're picking up roughly 5 years after, 5 years after part 2 with the survivors of that film, Sienna and her younger brother Jonathan, as the holidays are approaching. Sienna is getting out of a mental health facility and is having severe PTSD due to the events she had survived in the previous film. Now her brother is in college. He's kind of quiet, you know, slowly starting to get to know people, and you know, he's been through quite a lot, you know, just like Sienna, if you recall. And some of the locals have even been kind of following this case about these survivors. And while Sienna is visiting town after getting out of the mental health facility and visiting their aunt, she's been in touch with him, and she's not really doing that well. You know, she's having some, her ups and downs, and she's having some hallucinations and some panic attacks and starting to kind of see Art, you know, everywhere that she looks. And then we're kind of alternating between stuff about Art and his little new sidekick in a way, and kind of him getting back to the dead and slowly working his way into like wreaking havoc in this town and getting towards these two survivors. Now, you know, they had built off the supernatural aspects of the second film quite a bit. They kind of fleshed things out a bit more. Why and how he's coming back, what that little girl is in part 2, or this other demonic stuff that's happening. Basically, everything that's kind of been coming to the forefront about Art. Now, what I think this film really does well is that continuation. This definitely feels like a directly connected sequel rather than anything which is just rehashing a lot of what came before and putting a new skin on a similar story. And as the film is kind of working us towards being wrapped up, it's obvious that they're building up to a part 4, and from what I've read, this is going to be the end of the franchise with part 4. So, the big question is, what about the gore? You know, is it worse than part 2, such as that bedroom scene, if you'll remember that one? I'd read that there was a premiere in London where some people were walking out during the first 10 minutes getting really sick to their stomach. And it actually had me concerned that maybe the filmmakers would be more interested in just kind of upping that gore to a point where maybe the film itself would suffer, that it'd be just too much gore and kind of a lame story. Well, I got through that first 10 minutes, no real issues, and then the next 10, and so on, and no big deal. You know, there was worse stuff from that first 10 minutes. There was worse stuff in parts 1 and 2, actually. So I could only think that maybe these attendees hadn't ever seen the first 2. Maybe they're not even into horror that much in the first place, and instead we're just wanting to see this new popular horror film that they'd heard stuff about, but weren't actually fans of the franchise or the genre in general. Perhaps. That's just my guess, because it really wasn't that bad in my opinion. Now, as the rest of this film does unfold, you know, we definitely have some extremely violent scenes of the kind that we're used to, you know, that we're used to seeing in these films. But for me, I really feel like part 2 was a little bit worse, but it's subjective. For example, in part 2, the bedroom scene, you know, we have acts involving scissors and scalpels, bleach and salt, breaking and ripping off of limbs, and of course the mocking. The scene in particular really hit me hard, something about the scissors and the scalpels specifically, because I've been accidentally cut with both, you know, and know what a small cut can feel like if you get bleached into it. or salt into it. So it leads me to kind of imagine what they did with the scene as far as the extent that this character is going through, what that pain would feel like. Being familiar with a tiny bit of it and just imagining what a massive amount of that would feel like. Rather than something that I don't have experience, such as, like, take something like a chainsaw. In the case of Terrifier 3, it's quick, it's mechanical, it's devastating, but where even in a severely gross scene, it seems like I'm a little bit removed from that. You know, unlike scissors or a blade or like a razor, like a box cutter maybe, I've never been injured with a chainsaw, so I am a bit more removed. If any of that makes any sense, because it's brutal, absolutely. It's over-the-top gore, really over-the-top gore. And it also has the mocking and teasing, and there's one body part where, well, let's just say it's extremely rough. But in my opinion, the bedroom scene in part 2 was worse, so if you were able to handle that, you'll be able to handle part 3. But all in all, I will just sum up the quick layer on top here is to say, before we go into any spoilers, is that if you could handle part 1 and 2, you can handle this one easily. It expands from that second one and leads, directly into this bigger story, and then ends trying to push us into a part 4 in a very interesting way, and I can't wait to see what they do with that. We get more supernatural aspects kind of along with this. That's kind of pumped up a bit more, and this does not seem like a little $2 million movie. They really use that money well. The production value is high. I honestly don't know how they were able to pull this one off. All of that makes it more than worth checking out in the theater as part of celebrating the Halloween season, or if you can't make it out, it should be on streaming or rental, not too long from now. Okay, now that all that's wrapped up, some quick details to touch on what may be a bit spoilery. So here's your warning. Feel free to pick this video up after you've seen the film, or if you aren't concerned about any spoilers, let's just continue. So let's talk about Vicky. Talk about how sick she is. She's really disgusting, but also bringing a voice to the acts that are being done was definitely creepy, especially towards the end as Sienna's tied up. That whole thing was just gross. That weird demon thing happening, the lights in her eyes, simply gross. And I'm still kind of missing that little girl from the second one because she did a great job in that, but this Vicky is a great replacement to kind of working with art on some of this. And that discovery of her in the tub with all of that black ooze, that actually grossed me out a lot more than some of the other stuff in the movie. But the big one here is that shower scene. I actually had somebody just comment on something I put on social media asking them about it, and they brought up this shower scene with the chainsaw. Like I said, it was easier for me to take a chainsaw than a scalpel and scissors, and that bleach and salt and everything in part 2, but it was pretty intense as well, especially with when Cole, Jonathan's roommate, is getting kind of rear-ended and all the details that are coming with all of that. While I couldn't feel that chainsaw the way I would feel a scalpel or something in part 2, the extent to which Art is going with this, everything was great. It was some really messed up stuff that worked with the scene and was really disgusting and was pretty original because it didn't seem like anything he'd done in the first 2 films. Now, I am really interested to kind of see what they're going to do with part 4, with Jonathan being out of the picture, and whatever's going to happen with Gabby being in, I guess, hell or something along those lines. They're down to just our final girl, Sienna, and this trip to the underworld, it seems. So I'm guessing they are really planning something big, and I can't wait to see that. But this should be, great, and, like a great way to end it. And personally, I'm kind of happy that they're ending it. Not that I want it to be done so much as I don't want the franchise to be run into the ground. But let me take down that banner, and with that, I just, I've checked out several franchises you've seen on my channel over the years, and there are some entries which aren't just not as good as others, but there are entries in almost every franchise that I just wouldn't ever be up to revisiting. Like Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Scream, and especially Hellraiser, they all have entries which I just don't care to ever revisit. Now, if they wrap up the Terrifier franchise with another solid entry along the lines of Part 3, this will definitely be one of my top franchises, because I would get 4 solid movies that all work well, that I'm able to rewatch and really enjoy, with the only real issue being that Part 2 is a little bit long, and, the gore is over the top, so you definitely have to be in the mood for something quite that shocking. But at any rate, this one was great. It's great to get out to the theater, and is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out my entry here for Terrifier 3. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon if you haven't already to get notified for when I put up new content, which is typically 1 to 3 times a week. check out some of my back catalog, like these supercuts that I've been putting up, where I've taken some older content and made one big entry you can put on. And I'll, and be on the lookout for some of the new stuff that I have coming up soon. And I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. I'm back after this few weeks hiatus that I decided to take for most of September. I hope you enjoyed those supercuts and compilations that I put up over those weeks of some of the previous franchises that I had revisited. And there will be more of those coming down the line here and there, but for today, hopping back in. So, as a quick update, and idea of what to expect going forward, I decided to still make most of these videos spoiler-free, but to more often go into more detail towards the end of those videos. So you can queue up a video, get an overall idea of the film, and either stop it there and check out the rest after you've watched the film, or if you've already seen the film, or you're not concerned with spoilers, you can still continue to watch the rest of it as it unfolds. So anyways, while I did check out a lot of different films and TV shows over the course of this hiatus, most recently I checked out Oddity from 2024. This was a new release advertised on Shudder, and the synopsis is as follows. A psychic medium attempts to uncover the truth behind her sister's murder at the site of the crime. Now, this is by the same writer and director as Caveat, one which has been in my queue for a long time. I think that movie came out like 6 years ago, and I still have yet to sit down and watch it, but if Oddity is any comparison to that, I think I definitely want to check it out now. Because as for Odyssey specifically, this one definitely delivered. I went in pretty much blind, having never seen a trailer for this one either. Because pretty much every week there's some new ad campaign from Shudder about some of their recent arrivals and acquisitions and everything. And honestly, when I looked at the poster, I actually thought it was Gwendolyn Christie. I was wrong on that. But anyways, as I started out saying, this film definitely delivered, even going in with as little as I knew about it. We have this couple who is fixing up this old manor of sorts. They barely even have cell phone reception in there. And the wife is setting a timer on her camera to kind of take these pictures because she's kind of trying to capture some ghostly apparitions, something that her sister is interested in too, which adds a nice level to this, which does come up later. But it is also like this place is so unfurnished and unfinished that while her husband is away working at night, the wife is staying there, sleeping inside of a tent inside this place, which adds another little layer to stuff. But anyways, a former patient of her husband's, a man with some mental health issues, which more specifics come out later as we get more detail about this husband and his work, suddenly is pounding on the door, stating that while he saw the wife go out to the car and get something and bring it back in, he says that he saw somebody sneak inside and wants to be let inside to protect her. I mean, he seems very worried. He does seem very genuine and believable, but the question still comes forward as why was he there at all, much less watching her? This place is kind of remote. Now, we do get a flash forward here, or a little time jump here, as the now deceased woman's twin sister is trying to get more information. Now, her twin sister is blind, has a very different aesthetic, has very, almost like bleached skin in a way, blonde hair, but she has these psychic powers involving being able to tell stuff about an object just by holding it, kind of like Jeff Goldblum's character in the movie Vibes, which was one of my really early reviews, so I'll link up a very cringe-worthy link to that one at the end of this video. But anyways, she works in this antique shop, and people bring things in, and she can tell them stuff about it. So as the brother-in-law visits, he brings this glass eye from one of the patients that he has, who's now deceased, since she likes those sorts of things. Well, the husband is still working on this manor. He has a new love interest since it's been a little while, and while he is away, his new love interest is left at the house with this blind psychic sister who is visiting at a very inopportune time. And we slowly have this spooky mystery, unfold throughout these strange happenings and flashbacks. Now, some of what I really feel like this movie does right and why I feel it's worth checking out is, first off, there's not really a lot of gore. It has a very minor amount, and what it does have is very impactful. There's also not a lot of jump scares. We do get some little bits here and there, maybe a musical cue here and there, but it really doesn't rely on that to keep you on edge. It really builds a sense of tension and claustrophobia throughout, making it almost lean on the what if and what's next kind of going on in the back of your head versus something that's really in your face or something that just keeps jumping at you to try to make you scared. And finally, it's got a very slim runtime. It's only at a little bit over 90 minutes, so it's never padded or taking too long to get going, or really they just balanced everything perfectly in it. Now, along with all of that, the setting is great, being remote enough that somebody can't just simply run next door for help, but not so remote that everybody who ends up at this location is doomed. Having this idea of the camera on a timer, like I mentioned earlier, is an interesting way to reveal something spooky. Looking through old videos and pictures and seeing what it had captured. Plus that occasional click and pop out of nowhere as that camera decides to take a little picture of something. They just kind of build and give us these little nudges which make us feel more and more uneasy throughout, especially regarding this weird wooden doll kind of thing that the blind sister brings with her. It's just very creepy. But, as the story unfolds, we do get some really cool twists about what happened behind this murder, who's responsible, and so on. And the way that the actors brought this one to screen, it is a nice, short, spooky mystery that is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, here's the second part of this. Now, if you have already checked out the non-spoiler bits here are some quick spoiler-related items that I wanted to bring up. So if you have not seen this film yet, or you're worried about those spoilers, you can just come back here when you've seen it, or you can fast forward until this banner here comes down. So here we go. Now, there's not too much more that I wanted to add, but what I just wanted to say is the twist as far as how and why the wife was killed, I thought was really interesting. There were hints along the way that the husband was in on it, and but even if you caught all of those, the reveal was great, showing how they pull in this former patient who had overheard this plan for this murder, and it kind of makes his appearance at the beginning make a lot more sense. Even the setup of that hole in the floor and setting that phone as a nice little trap for the blind sister. But one thing that really stuck out that I did have kind of a hard time understanding was how the former inmate was killed. So I get that he was let out and they found a way to pin the murder on him and get him back, but it looked like his head was kind of bashed in there, and it seems like it would take a lot to explain that away. So I may have just missed something from that, maybe just some quick line of dialogue that explained his death and how that was kind of handled. Also, the golem, that big wooden monster thing. It would have been nice to have a little bit more about that. Just a bit, but at least it made for a spooky creature to be brought in. Those random shifts in how it was seated long before it actually gets up and is moving around is definitely unsettling. And finally, as a reminder about, I'd like to have had a reminder about that bell, that haunted bell. I was trying to remember what the deal was with that and what it would cause, like what the expectation was. But other than that, now that all this spoiler stuff is done, even with all that, I really enjoyed this one. It's currently available on Shudder, which I've mentioned several times. There's a lot of movies that I've covered from Shudder, so if it all sounds interesting, head on over to check it out. It's pretty cheap, and you can usually find a free trial as well. But anyways, that's all I have for this entry here. I hope adding a little bit more at the end here made these videos a little bit more interesting. I'm going to continue to work on them and try to get them up between 1 to 3 times a week. Welcome to October 1st. Enjoy the spooky season. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. As some of you may have heard, there is a new film by the name of Maxxxine, which was just recently released. It came out, I believe, at the time of this video. It's last weekend, and it's been getting a lot of attention. Now, this is the third film in this Ty West and Mia Goth trilogy, which started with X, was followed by Pearl, and now it is concluding with Maxxxine. But for those who are unfamiliar and are wondering what all the fuss is about, I figured I'd put together this video regarding all 3 films, not just to know, what I think about this new film Maxxxine, but what the other 2 ones, the other 2 previous films were about, and if you even need to see them to enjoy Maxxxine. So, let's first dive in here with X from 2022, which stars, among others, Mia Goth, as well as Wednesday's Jenna Ortega. Now, a basic rundown is that we have a group of these filmmakers getting together at this remote farmhouse in 1979, I believe, to film an adult film. Now, an old couple is renting this space out to them on their property, but things start to take this dark turn with several of them getting killed off. Now, this is a very slow build, in my opinion, because we're kind of spending a lot of time getting to know these characters who are making this film. This helps us just kind of get to know them better, so we actually kind of care about them and don't want them to die. But it's definitely a slow build, but by the time the violence starts, which is about an hour into this film, things get violent and twisted and bloody very quickly from that point out. It really goes over the top. But it has a really great feel to it, which reminds me in some ways of Texas Chainsaw Massacre or other like secluded 70s kinds of horror film. We also have some really great makeup effects in this, especially with Mia Goth, because not only does she play Maxxxine, one of the stars of this adult film, but she also plays the old woman Pearl. Now, I remember liking this one, but thinking it was just mid-range for me. You know, I would still recommend it, of course, because it does have that throwback 70s horror feel to it and is definitely a good slasher. I just wasn't really wowed by it. But later that year, they released the prequel, Pearl, which centers on that old woman, Pearl, from X, when she was younger. So Mia Goth is reprising this role now, playing Pearl when this story takes place in about 1918. So the Spanish flu is taking hold, and she's spending most of her time kind of staying safe at home, only doing limited quick trips into town, wearing a mask and everything, while her husband is off to war. Also, her father was stricken by this stroke, and he cannot move or communicate, so she's needing to assist him, while living with her very overbearing and abusive mother, who's just really bringing the hammer down on her hard. Now, this one plays much more like a drama, in my opinion, kind of seeing Pearl as she's younger with her dreams of becoming a dancer and you know, going off to tour, while she's being stuck at home taking care of her father and waiting for her husband to come back from war. So this gives us this great background about that Pearl character from X, and as we even have this really amazing monologue toward the ending that Mia Goth delivers as she's kind of confessing some stuff to a friend of hers about what's been happening with her on the farm, you know, what she's thinking about. Basically, we're getting to see her slowly lose her mind and give in to like this dark side that's been growing underneath. Now, this is basically an entry just to tell us about Pearl and how she and her husband ended up being the way that they were by the time we meet up with them again in X, when they were renting out this farmhouse. And it's interesting to see this farmhouse and the surrounding property, because between these two films there's roughly a 60-year time gap, so we get to see when this property was very new and is upkept very well. It looked really beautiful. And then fast forwarding in the previous film in X to see it in the late 70s when it's a bit run down because these old folks can't really take care of it that well. But then after that, we now have Maxxxine. This is the one that just came out this past weekend. This follows our final girl, Maxxxine, from X, the one that was played by Mia Goth, as she continues her path towards becoming a star in Hollywood. She's definitely haunted by her past, and having survived that situation from the film X, she was one who got away. She's become a pretty popular adult film star who's trying to kind of break into more Hollywood-style films, such as a horror film that she's been cast in, which is going to hopefully be her big break to move out of the adult industry and into Hollywood. But this is the mid-'80s, and the Night Stalker is in full swing with their murder spree throughout Los Angeles, and there are also religious groups that are heavily protesting different studios who are producing horror films, claiming that they are all immoral. Now, Maxxine's past is kind of starting to catch up with her, and women she has worked with in previous films are being murdered, possibly by this Night Stalker. So there are these open investigations to find out what's happening and to find out if Maxxxine is going to be another target. All of this is happening when she's finally getting her big break in this horror film. Now, this one plays much more like a thriller, a Hollywood thriller involving a serial killer. But overall, I would say this entire trilogy, I really feel it was excellent. This is mainly because they really spend time in each film focusing on certain characters that we need to kind of help us connect with them. I mean, they even literally kill off a character in Maxxxine, which really bummed me out because I was really liking some of these characters. Happens in each film, ones that you don't want to see them taken out. So that makes it scary. As I've said before, in a horror film, I need to care about the characters and not want them dead in order for me to enjoy it and get wrapped up in that fright factor. And there were ones I really liked in all three of these films who were taken out. Now, another thing which makes me enjoy this trilogy as a whole the most is the fact that each film feels very different. X feels much more like slasher horror. You know, it's got those vibes of 70s horror and Texas Chainsaw Massacre thrown into it. Pearl feels much more like a horror drama. There are some horrific things that happen, but it feels more dramatic in many ways. and Maxxxine feels more like a horror thriller where it has a lot to do with crime and police investigation and somebody stalking these characters. Each of these films really have their own feel, and they can be enjoyed as a disconnected entry without checking out the others. But as a whole, they really support each other well, and they're all worth, trying to see each one of those. You could simply watch any one of these entries separately, but they do add something to the other installments. So for instance, Pearl lets you know a lot more about who this old Pearl character is in X. And X lets us know a lot more about this Maxxxine character, who we then follow up with in Maxxxine. But for one final long one here is that when I was revisiting X and Pearl in prep for Maxxxine coming out, I decided instead of watching them in release order to watch them in chronological order. So I ended up starting with Pearl so I could see that background of the Pearl character, then seeing X, and it actually made me enjoy X much, much more to watch Pearl first, even though it was on a rewatch. Because when I first watched X, like I said, I thought it was good, but ultimately kind of mid-range. I was kind of confused about this old couple and especially about Pearl, but ultimately I did enjoy it. But revisiting this by watching Pearl first really helped me kind of increase my enjoyment of X, in that I got to see Pearl younger with her whole life ahead of her. We got to know about her dreams, her wants, and her desires, and these little bits of her becoming who she was by the time we see her in X. So then when I watched X later on, actually that same day, understanding more about who Pearl was and having that kind of fresh in my mind, who she is, what she is, as far as like this darkness in her, it really helped me understand the reasoning behind some of the things happening at this farmhouse in X. And I even kind of felt sorry for Pearl in some ways, some very small ways. But anyways, now when it comes to Maxxxine, of course, this story takes place about 6 years after X, and following our X final girl Maxxxine shifts us from Pearl now to Maxxxine. Knowing the horrors that she survived in that previous film as she had to kind of fight her way to Hollywood, and that she succeeded in adult film and still wanting to make it like big in Hollywood, yet she's both haunted by her past and this threat of this Night Stalker. So it just kind of helped me understand that character a bit better. So, by the time we get to Maxxxine, it really gives us a wrapped up ending, which, for this entire trilogy, in such a way that I don't want any other entries. I think everything is very self-contained here, but I would recommend, whether you haven't seen these before or even if you're just going to revisit them, is to watch them in chronological order. Start with Pearl, move on to X, and then hop into the theater to see Maxxxine. I feel that the story arc works out much better like that, and it's kind of like the best way to check them out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick video here about X, Pearl, and the final entry, Maxxxine. X and Pearl are on various streaming services currently, whether part of a paid rental or like a service that's already something that maybe you are already subscribed to. And Maxxxine is currently in theaters. Now, like I said, if you enjoy any of these on there, you can enjoy any of them as a separate entry, but going in with Pearl first, then X, and then Maxxxine, if you go that route, in my opinion, it helps the arc out a lot better. But your results may vary. I just knew that when Maxxxine was announced, I enjoyed X and Pearl enough to want to make sure I got out to the theater. Drop some cash on the film to support the filmmakers and get some concessions to help support that theater. Anyways, that's all I've got for this one. If you have seen these films, or a few of them, sound off in the comments. How do you feel about how they tell the story? Do you like them in the release order or in the chronological order? And if you've seen Maxxxine, what do you think of Maxxxine? Anyways, thanks for coming by. That's about all I got for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to another entry here. Typically I post on Mondays, Wednesdays, or Fridays, but for this one I wanted to do a simple one-off in what I will call a special midnight movie for this one, or at least one newly released to Shudder after a short theatrical run with the 2023 film Late Night with the Devil, which stars David Dastmalchian. Now, I'd been wanting to see this one ever since I'd heard about it, before even seeing a trailer, and I'd really wanted to make it out to the theater, but, really wanted to get out there to put my money out there in the theater to see it, but things just didn't really line up with the schedule and everything, so I had to wait for this to release on Shudder, because it also wasn't available to rent on video on demand. But what is this film about? Well, the synopsis is as follows. A live television broadcast in 1977 goes horribly wrong, unleashing evil into the nation's living rooms. Now, I've seen Maxxxine pop up in several works over the years, and I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed podcasts with interviews with him and everything. And, you know, even though I've really enjoyed his work, knowing that he's also a major horror fan made me even more interested in checking this one out. And he is, in this, simply put, great. I mean, he really is amazing. Now, a good chunk of this film, I would say roughly 30 to 45 minutes, is a lot of leading up to the more interesting demonic portions that kind of unfold later on. It is all laid out like a documentary telling about this late night show which Maxxine's character is the host of. So we get kind of filled in on the inception of the show, its successes, where its ratings start to stall and then kind of dip a bit, and aspects of his personal life, you know, regarding his wife and these weird nature retreats that he would go on, which are inspired by some supposedly true events. But our main focus here is that they are ringing in Halloween, and they're using Halloween as kind of like a reason to put together this special spooky episode to try to win back some more viewers, try to help their ratings, with guests such as like a mentalist, a skeptic who's there to doubt everything, and our main focus, a little girl who has a demonic spirit inside of her. She's a survivor of a cult who is assisted by a researcher who has been kind of working with her through recovery on this. So, of course, we get a lot of pushback about the mentalist and even this little girl from our skeptic. But there are aspects of their portions of the show which are not really going according to plan, and some unexplainable situations which make it kind of emanate this feel of growing like darker and darker and spookier throughout. And in between these segments of the show, we get what is explained to be like archival backstage footage that was recovered, which kind of help us stitch together an overall story behind the scenes, along with whatever this, you know, presentation is going to show us on screen for during the, you know, talk show portion of the film. Now, the overall tone of this is a mix of unease and suspense the entire time. Knowing the synopsis, or even just, you know, taking in what they kind of introduced you to at the beginning of this setup, we know that something bad is on the horizon, and something demonic and unnerving, and we're kind of waiting to see that come out. And whenever we have this talk show style speak, you know, conversation transitions, or switching to the commercial backstage portion versus the on-air portion, it always feels like something is kind of teasing us along, poking us closer and closer to something crazy happening. We have this welcoming side of the late night host and the darkness on the horizon. You know, we have these little bits of late night humor, and then that skeptical arrogance being thrown in. Now, but I would have to say, like, in general, I feel like it's the performances, which are the final bit, which really sold this film for me. Maxxxine, just in simple line deliveries and facial expressions, conveys so much to really kind of put me in his shoes as far as what he's feeling. And the same with Risa Terry, and especially between like their interactions with each other, it's just absolutely great. But the character of the little girl, Lily, who's played by Ingrid Torelli, this is where the darkness side really shines, and how darkness can shine. Anyways, she kind of brings in this creep factor to the screen, which really sticks out and is very unnerving the entire time. This really creepy stuff. So as she's kind of channeling this demonic spirit and letting it out, it really sinks in, and it's really great. Now, as the events kind of around her and this show unfold, I was definitely pulled in completely, eager to see where this would go, and especially where things would wrap up toward the end of this. I felt like I was kind of like staying up late to see this strange situation going down on live TV, which had me just glued to the screen. But by the time everything was done, I have to admit I was partially disappointed that I hadn't made it out to the theater to see it on the big screen in a darkened theater with a bunch of strangers. But in other ways, I was actually kind of happy that I got to see it in the comfort of my own living room with all those lights out. Kind of like I was a viewer of this fictional talk show, kind of watching these events unfold. And you know, these days in horror, I feel like the studios have kind of caught on to the fact that usually for a pretty small investment, for anywhere from 2 to 10 million, they can hopefully just have one decent weekend and make a profit on that investment with horror. So sometimes the market gets kind of flooded with, you know, horror films that in many cases just kind of fall flat, or they're just kind of okay. But there are gems out there like Late Night with the Devil, which really stand out as something in the horror genre that's a bit more special in this landscape, which is definitely more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick little midnight movie special here for the video release. for Late Night with the Devil, which at the time of this video is available exclusively on Shudder, so it's not even available on video on demand. But if you do not have Shudder, go ahead and Google around. There's often either a free trial or a discounted trial or discounted membership for you to go ahead and hop in there and check it out. Because also, if you are a fan of horror and thrillers, you'll likely enjoy several of the titles that they have to offer. Anything from the old B movies that they have that are really silly to some of the more like elevated horror kind of stuff that's a little bit more cerebral and really kind of messes with you. Anyways, that's about all I have for this little Midnight Movies special entry for Late Night with the Devil. Thanks for coming by and for sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit. And if you are new, be sure to check out my back catalogs. If you enjoy this video and some of the others I have, go ahead and subscribe and hit that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new videos, which, as I said earlier, is typically 1 to 3 times a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Occasionally I mix it up a little bit, but we'll see. Anyways, that's all I have for this one. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to another entry here for a little throwback horror as we go into the 70s, into 1976 actually, with The Omen. Now, I'd seen this one before, but it'd probably been almost 30 years since I saw it last. Definitely been a very long time. It's probably sometime in the 90s when I'd seen it. But anyways, what's this film about? Well, here's a synopsis. Mysterious deaths surround an American ambassador. Could the child that he is raising actually be the Antichrist, the devil's own son? So I had picked up this box set here at which I didn't even know that there were actually 4 of these films. You know, I knew that there were 3, I believe, but I'd only seen the first one, and I actually got this one at a local bookstore and record shop named Mojo Books, which I'll link to in the description. It's out by USF, and you know, they had a pretty good deal on it, so I scooped it up, and I figured it'd be a good candidate for another franchise review, which I actually hadn't done one of those, I don't think, since almost a year ago when I was covering all the Scream films. But, you know, it's definitely been quite a while. So with this one, I was anxious to dive right in because I'd recently picked up The Exorcist on Blu-ray when I was at a horror convention not that long ago. And it was great to revisit this one, especially both because it was in high definition and it had been so long since I'd seen it. And I also revisited Rosemary's Baby, which had been so long since I'd seen it, I pretty much didn't have any memory of it. As well as Amityville Horror, the original. You know, I had a really great time revisiting all 3 of these films. A couple of them I put up videos for, which I will link to in the description and probably at the closing screen as well. But one of the things that I that I noticed was that, and this is going to sound a little bit strange, is that when I checked out the Lords of Salem, you know, the Rob Zombie film here, which I really enjoyed, but some people didn't really care for, I felt like it really had this look and feel that reminded me of some of the 70s horror films that I've been, you know, checking out, or even some of the early 80s stuff. So, similar to what I felt with, you know, Amityville Horror, along with Exorcist and all those, you know, even going back further into the 60s with Rosemary's Baby, I felt like this one kind of, you know, leaned more towards the characters and what they're going through, kind of building up your connection to them first before anything really happens, and not as much of the jumps and gore and violence and everything. But, you know, so revisiting The Omen definitely piqued my interest, given how these other revisits had gone. And definitely I was pulled in a bit more, and you know, because I was invested in those characters in similar ways as far as how they built out this story. Now, as for who's in The Omen, now I hadn't really seen much with Gregory Peck over the years, or at least it's been a very long time since I'd seen anything that he'd been in. And the only other actors I recognized were Patrick Troughton, who I believe played the second Doctor in Doctor Who, and I'd only seen a handful of those episodes, and David Warner, who, you know, just seems to have been in a lot of things when I was growing up. Seen him in everything from like Star Trek to what's that one with the vampire? My Best Friend's a Vampire. I think I did a video for that as well. Seen him in a lot of things over the years. So an interesting thing about The Omen was that, you know, as I mentioned, I really loved how they make you kind of connect with these characters, you know, connect with this man as he gets his new job as this ambassador and what's going on with his family, having lost a child during childbirth and then taking on another as sort of like an unofficial adoption. And even knowing the synopsis and knowing that this kid is the Antichrist, I couldn't help but kind of feel for him, you know, because he's just this little kid, even though you kind of know that something bad's going to happen as a result of him just existing, as all these creepy things start happening around him, all these creepy deaths. It's very, very strange. But and there wasn't really a whole lot of gore or violence in this film. You know, there were a couple of shocking moments that stand out. You know, a couple of shocking kills that are really just at that level that they really stand out, just in contrast to the rest of the film being more about what this family's going through and this slow mystery unraveling here. But you know, a lot of that violence that is in this would just seem very tame by today's standards, even stuff that we just have on regular broadcast TV. There's just a lot of that creepy factor as to what's going on, this mystery of the situation, and how much of what this priest, the one played by Troughton, is taking is you know, is it just like strange religious fanaticism where he's kind of reading into some of these signs too much? Or is it actually all real, you know, a real threat that needs to be considered? Because as I've mentioned before, sometimes the religious horror stuff really hits me kind of hard. You know, when it comes to religious horror such as The Exorcist or even like Prince of Darkness, one of my favorite John Carpenter films, there's always this idea that what if everything about it is real? Everything in the Bible is how they are interpreting it for the story in this film. Every single thing, especially when it comes to like demons and spirits and the devil and so forth, what if that's all real? That's not something you can outsmart, outrun, and get away from. It's going to find you, it's going to get you, it's going to torment you. So it gave me nothing but that sense of uneasy the entire time I was watching it, while wanting to see how this thing's going to resolve. So that connection with the family, with these characters, along with that slow creeping aspect of what's to come, kept me interested the entire time. And throughout all of this, I was very surprised also that it really held up. You know, though it, you know, even though it's a little bit dated, being set in the mid-70s, I still kind of catch myself looking more towards the 80s throwbacks usually, or finding some new horror, because, you know, these days the market seems a bit saturated, so it's hard to find those diamonds in the rough. But every time I take a trip a little bit further back, such as into the 70s or even into the 60s and 50s, I always end up enjoying what I come across, and The Omen is one of those in that mix of films, which is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick little video here for The Omen from 1976, which at the time of this video is only available on paid rental. However, if you are into collecting, that 4-disc set that I got usually goes for about $30 to $40, depending on where you scoop it up. And I think I'd even seen it at Walmart for a bit cheaper than that at one time also. Anyways, thanks for stopping by and for sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit. While here, be sure to like and subscribe. Sound off in the comments your thoughts about this film, and I am eventually going to cover the other 3 films in this set as I kind of go through this franchise review, and may even end up checking out that remake from 2006 to see what they kind of did with the material for that project. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Sorry for the light week last week, as I picked up quite a bug that I'm still kind of recovering from, but I wanted to continue on with the franchise review of the Omen films. And so I've picked up with the next entry for Damien, The Omen Part 2 from 1978. Now this one I know I had never seen before. I'd never seen this one previously, and all I knew was I kind of had this presumption that if they were already making a sequel that quickly, perhaps they were kind of jumping on running things on, as I've seen with other films like the Jaws films or Exorcist or several other horror and thriller films over the years, that maybe there wouldn't be much substance to it, since I mainly only heard about the first one. And perhaps that'll prove to be true with parts 3 or 4, maybe one of those ones is kind of along those lines. But as for this one, well, here's a synopsis. Damien, the Antichrist, now about to turn 13 years old, finally learns of his destiny under the guidance of an unholy disciple of Satan. Meanwhile, dark forces begin to eliminate all those who suspect the child's true identity. So, this one actually surprised me quite a bit. Even knowing that this kid is the Antichrist, something which we were told in the first film, but we still had to kind of see that story unfold to really get on board with what was happening. This is something we already knew going in, but I still found this one to be surprisingly good, in my opinion. One of the things that I'd heard also about this idea of the Antichrist is that it's not going to be some devilish and obviously evil and destructive force, but somebody you would like and admire and trust, who also happens to be the deceiver who will bring about the end of times. So with this film, with Damien, he is played that way quite a bit, and it comes across really well. It seems for the most part like a nice kid, maybe a little bit entitled or maybe a little bit too sure of himself or something, but otherwise, a good kid, I guess. except for the events around him as he's kind of being guided down this path. Similar to the first film, you know, it's not this little kid that we're afraid of. It's the circumstances around them which are more frightening than the kid himself. You know, where this film does, what this film does really well is by not trying to retell the story of the first film. You know, not pulling like a Home Alone 2, where they simply just wrap a new cover on top of the original story and then try to pass it off as a new film. I really felt like this one was its own thing, like a real sequel, just trying to take the story into another step rather than retread too much. After all, like I said, it was never the little kid that we're afraid of, you know, bringing about the end of times, but more like this kid was kind of like a seedling in a way. You know, they're going to bring it about someday as they kind of rise to power and these, you know, issues are happening around them and they're bringing about the end of times. This is just a step in that story, seeing this kid in military school and what's kind of happening as they're learning about their destiny. Seeing him slowly kind of become the Antichrist knowingly was a great journey, as was, you know, like in the first one, the situations and people around him. You know, those negatively affected by his rise or attempting to stop his rise or aiding him in that development of kind of realizing his true potential. Now, along with us on this ride also, I saw some recognizable actors such as Nicholas Pryor, who I had just seen in Morgan Stewart's Coming Home, and which I posted a video for a few weeks back, so I'll link to that at the end of this video. And he was also in Falcon and the Winter Soldier more recently, playing Zemo's aide or butler, I believe. And also there was Sylvia Sidney, who I remember mainly as Juno from Beetlejuice, as well as being in Mars Attacks. And we also get a very young Lance Henriksen in this, who of course is from like Aliens, Near Dark, Millennium, Terminator, and just several other films over the years. Now, while this one is not as good as the original, it's still a very worthy addition to that storyline and kind of feels like just another episode that's definitely worth, you know, tuning in for and seeing what it's all about. Now, finally, as we approach the ending of the story in this film, I gotta say I did experience the only negative thing that I felt throughout this. It was a little bit anticlimactic initially. So, you know, we lead up, we kind of have this little showdown in a way, things are kind of wrapped up some, but ultimately it was just kind of okay. Until in the last few minutes we do get this nice twist to really reel everything in, wrap up the rest of this story, and leave things open for the next movie. Because I feel like with that it made what up until that point was kind of, you know, a good movie, decent movie with kind of a lackluster ending, but, you know, otherwise an enjoyable film, become much better with that twist at the end. It really added something to it and made it more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest quick little video here for the second entry as I've been going into these Omen films and this Omen franchise with Damien, the Omen 2 from 1978, which at the time of this recording is available on Shudder, or it's not Shudder, on Hulu, as well as a lot of different paid rental services out there. And also as a reminder, I do have 2 more to go through in this set, so and maybe after a short break I'll even check out the remake from the early 2000s to see what a new production kind of brought to this story, if that was worth checking out. So be sure to like, comment, and especially subscribe so you'll be able to check in on those as I release them, which, now that I appear to be on the mend, should be over the next 2 to 4 weeks. And I also have more Elvira presentations. I just posted one last week. We got another one on the way. Some more 80s throwbacks, and of course I've got over 200 videos in that back catalog if you want to go and check those out. Anyways, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for coming by and for sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit. And I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back. Unless you're new, in that case, just welcome for the first time. I hope you end up subscribing by the end of this. But anyways, I have another quick video here for everyone today, as I've been kind of working my way through this Omen franchise that I picked up on Blu-ray, trying to go through all 4 of those films, with this entry, which is for The Final Conflict, Omen 3, from 1981, starring Sam Neill, who you may know from this little film called Jurassic Park, but also in The Mouth of Madness, Event Horizon, Daybreakers for all of you horror fans, and if you're into the indie scene a little bit, an old film from the early 90s called Until the End of the World, which one day I'll do a video on that, but it's 4 hours and 45 minutes long, so we'll see. Anyways, the synopsis for this entry in the Omen franchise is as follows. The now adult Antichrist plots to eliminate his future divine opponent, while a cabal of monks plot to stop him. So, this entry is billed as, you know, the last chapter in the Omen trilogy. And it definitely sets itself up that way. As I mentioned in the video for Damien, the Omen 2, this feels like has a similar feel, that it feels like a chapter or an episode in a story planned throughout all of these sequels so far. Where, of course, the first one kind of just focused on the birth of Damien and the discovery and acceptance that he's the Antichrist. The second one focusing on him kind of coming to that realization while others are circling around him to either assist or confirm and stop him. This one is simply that next step, you know, so it's Damien in his early 30s, vying for both corporate and political influence, aware of who he is, what he is, having come to terms with and embracing being the Antichrist. We get this view that we hadn't really seen in the previous two films, you know, the open acceptance of who he is and his plan as the Antichrist for stopping the second coming of Christ and dominating the world. So, as it mentions, we have this group of monks who know exactly who he is and what he is. They, you know exactly that this person in particular is the Antichrist, and they have tools and plans to try to take him out. While Damien has assistance with his plans as well, you know, being the Antichrist. But what sticks out to me about this one the most, I'd have to say, is how well Sam Neill actually plays his character. He has this sense of danger and power, yet somehow a lot of charisma that he really pulls off. He's very charming. You know, he's not some power-hungry asshole who's kind of, you know, who you would immediately want to resist, but somebody who could convince others to help him on his path. So we see his followers kind of gathering, manipulating what's happening around him, getting their hands dirty to ensure that he takes his place, you know, for world dominance. Like the others, this one isn't about the danger directly from Damien and what he's doing so much as, you know, as far as what actually makes it frightening, so much as like the situations around him and now the actions of his followers. For instance, we have luckily an implied, as we never see the detail, killing of children born on a certain day, you know, literal infants born on a certain day who may be the second coming of Christ who can stop him. Seeing how cold and calculated his followers are that go along with this. People from all walks of life stepping in to basically murder these children. And as Sam Neill plays Damien, you know, he plays it to that same charismatic effect in a way the entire time as these actions unfold. So it just kind of feels a bit more creepy and a bit more dangerous and just all out, you know, all around evil. So as we approach the ending, we get what is obviously supposed to be the end of this story of the Omen. You know, this glorious and triumphant ending, and evil is stopped and all is well. The way it's laid out, and the tagline stating that this is the last chapter in the Omen trilogy, again, there's 4 in this set, we'll let you know what happened. They truly meant to end it here, it feels like, which should make this part 4 interesting, because the ratings are quite low. I think it was originally made for TV or something along those lines. I know they've tried to do other things with the Omen since. But with those, you know, I'm going to go into it with some very low expectations for part 4, and I'm actually more interested in seeing what they did with the remake from the early 2000s to see what new stuff they wanted to bring to the story to try to retell it. But, and I believe there's also a prequel of some sort that's planned to come out in April of 2024, so more to come on that one. But back to this one, Sam Neill is the one who actually just makes this film. Everything about him just sells this film, makes it worth checking out. His performance alone carried everything about this film. You know, it's dangerous and creepy and charismatic, and though there are a few slow spots here and there, just after about the halfway mark, which I've seen that in a lot of movies, where somewhere around the halfway mark it kind of has this little lull, which I think could probably be fixed with a re-edit of some sort, maybe just trim 10 or 15 minutes off of it. The overall story, you know, all things considered, this one is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest entry for the 3rd entry in this Omen franchise, for the Final Conflict Omen 3 from 1981, which at the time of this video is available on Hulu as well as paid rental. So if you're interested in these Omen films, head on over there, check it out. So far I'm 3 for 3. I've really liked all 3 of these, and I would watch all 3 of them again. Maybe even as like binging them all in one night. I've really been enjoying these stories, and I was especially very surprised with part 3. I really figured they would have just run out of steam by then. Part 4, we'll have to see how that is in the next week or 2 when I get that one done. Anyways, thanks for coming by and for sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit, as does subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, interacting with this, and checking out that back catalog of over 200. I can't believe we've done over 200 of these, and I haven't even hit the 3-year mark yet. Anyways, be sure to stick around at the end for some links that I have for some other videos, and you know, be sure to subscribe to see new ones as they come out, which is typically 1 to 3 times a week I try to put a video up. That's all I got. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. I'm all caught up, or on the films anyways, for The Omen. You know, I started checking out these films a few months back when I purchased the box set that had the first 3 films in the Omen trilogy, I guess you could say, and the 2006 remake. I watched those 3, tracked down the made-for-TV Part 4 that they tried doing back in the 90s, and you know, I saw that one on Hulu. And then I even decided to go ahead and check out that 2006 remake, doing a video for each one of them. For the most part, I enjoyed them, the first 3 anyways, and though I never planned on kind of diving into that TV show, I wasn't really finished because I knew that this film was coming for the first Omen. It just came out this past weekend. Here we have a prequel to The Omen, but other than simply being a prequel, you know, what is this one about? Well, the synopsis is as follows. A young American woman is sent to Rome to begin a life of service to the church, but encounters a darkness that causes her to question her faith and uncovers a terrifying conspiracy that hopes to bring about the birth of evil incarnate. So, the first question I had, because I'd seen the trailer once, but I didn't really catch on, was what's a time frame for this one? Would it be a prequel to the 2006 remake, or would it be a prequel to the original? Well, luckily, it's a prequel to the original, as this one takes place in the early 70s. And this is great because it sets up right against the original trilogy. I think that was a great move to do that. And second question would be, can this work? You know, sometimes with prequels, they don't really work that well, or at least, you know, they have some issues in that we already know where many major aspects of the story will ultimately go. Is little pod racing kid going to be okay? Well, yeah, he'll end up becoming Darth Vader. Oh, what's going to happen with this thing they found in Antarctica? Well, we already saw the thing, so the prequel, who really cares? So sometimes it doesn't really work, but luckily with this one, they focus on other aspects that actually improve some aspects of the original trilogy, in my opinion. So this prequel is about how the Antichrist will be brought about in general, you know, meaning the really early stages, bringing about his birth. And what works well for me in that is that it opens up the door to figure out why the Antichrist is being brought about and who is behind it, rather than simply alluding to these evil forces circling in to make sure that the Antichrist comes. But we also get a few curveballs thrown in at us, so we don't always know exactly where everything's going. We get some interesting twists here and there, as well as an ending which not only satisfies, you know, heavily in that it shows who the child will end up with, leading us directly into the beginning of the original Omen film, but it also laid some groundwork for if they want to try to do some sort of a spin-off of sorts, or maybe like a new version of the Omen 4, you know, a story which kind of branches away from Damien if they kind of see a way to expand that. So the groundwork is there, even though this one is tied up really nicely, but hopefully if this movie does well, you know, we'll get some more out of the franchise. But all in all, I really enjoyed this one, surprisingly. You know, I would say that I kind of like it better than the Omen Part 2. You know, so if I had to rank them, I would probably say the original, Part 3, the first Omen, the Omen 2, the remake, and then that Part 4 for TV. But anyways, back to this one specifically. We get some points where things do slow down a little bit, but I feel like that happens a lot in religious horror, where the audience is left with these moments of slowness and darkness to kind of let certain aspects really seep in. We get a lot of darkness, we get a few jumps, we get some gore, but it's not really over the top. We get a few graphic scenes, you know, and some quick shots, and a lot of implications throughout, especially when it comes to childbirth, not to mention conceiving the baby in the first place. Things get pretty gross with all that. But we also get some really creepy, dark, disturbing, and religiously haunting kind of aspects all woven together into this film. So I could see some who are not familiar with the Omen franchise, or with the original films especially, maybe having a hard time getting into this. You know, it's kind of, you know, it's hard to say. But with that being said, the person who I saw the film with had never seen any of the Omen stuff, and they actually really enjoyed it quite a bit. But like a lot of horror films, or actually films in general, you know, I could see this one will no doubt be hit or miss with a lot of people. But for me, seeing as how they kind of explained the backstory in a way which was interesting and helped explain certain aspects of the original trilogy, that dark, creepy religious feel, This linking us up directly to that original film, especially right up to the opening moments of that film, made this one a great one to get out to the theater and see on the big screen, and it was more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest video here for the first Omen from 2024. This is the 6th film in the Omen franchise, which, some I enjoyed and some I didn't. But hey, this makes 4 out of those 6 films that I really enjoyed and could see watching again. Perhaps doing a 7 or 8 hour long session of watching, these 4 films here, the prequel and the original trilogy, though that may bring about some pretty funky dreams by the end of the night to have a whole day filled with the Antichrist. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. I will link at the end to a playlist for those original Omen films that I went through in case you hadn't seen those videos before. Also, I'm closing in on my 500 subscribers by the end of April goal. So if not currently subscribed, please consider subscribing and checking out my back catalog, as I have well over 200 other videos on there. Anyways, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and for those who came along with me on this journey on the Omen from the beginning, thanks for sticking with it, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. I have an interesting one here, one which may or may not sit well with you. I've seen some mixed thoughts about this one, as I'm even trying to still kind of wrap my head around it myself, which is for the 2024 film I Saw the TV Glow. This film stars Justice Smith, who I'm mainly familiar with from Detective Pikachu and Dungeons and Dragons. I think he was in one of the Jurassic World movies as well. But anyways, the synopsis for this film is as follows. 2 teenagers bond over their love of a supernatural TV show, but it is mysteriously cancelled. That's actually not a really good synopsis. It doesn't really seem to cover much, but I guess it could be kind of difficult to get this across. But anyways, for my new format that I've been doing, I will go over the basics about what it is, why I enjoy it, and why you may want to check this one out before going into any detail which could be considered a spoiler, which will be at the ending of the video before wrapping things up. But don't worry, I will put up this banner when it's time for me to put up those little spoiler bits of information, and we'll let you know ahead of time. Anyways, I didn't really know what to expect going into this one. I do this frequently where I don't even really look up a synopsis. I sometimes just go by a cover of a poster or something. But yeah, I had very little knowledge except hearing it mentioned from time to time. I'd seen a post here and there about it, and saw it was by A24, and they've never really let me down. So first off, to go into a little bit more detail, we just to kind of know what to expect with this one. We start off with, we do get some time jumps in here, and that our lead, Owen, it kind of starts with him being pretty young, still in the 7th grade, meeting this girl at school who is reading a companion book to a TV show called The Pink Opaque. Owen has seen commercials for this and always wanted to check it out, but his father wouldn't let him stay up late to watch it. And he's also extremely shy, so it's hard to even try to make conversation with this kid, Maddie, who is a couple years older than him, but lets him kind of read through some of the book, and even arranges a way for him to sneak out, say he's sleeping over at another friend's place, while actually sneaking over to her place to watch some of the show with her and one of her friends. Now, over the years, this is their main connection, the 2 of them, with her later recording episodes for him so he can watch them on VHS later. Now, despite knowing Maddie via this shared interest of the show, he's still very shy and closed off around her. He's definitely very socially awkward and very unsure of himself as well. But we get a lot of discussions through their relationship about how things change throughout high school, friends drifting apart, discovering different sexual orientations or lack of interest in anything sexual in general, family health issues, relationships with parents, and so on, but they always kind of come back to their connection over The Pink Opaque. Now, Owen is pretty obsessed with it, even after it was canceled, watching the tapes over and over again. Now, this film, they put in some clips from a show within a show, so they kind of created some footage for this Pink Opaque, and they're all framed as best as I can kind of compare is, let's say, Buffy the Vampire Slayer with a bit of Adventures of Pete and Pete kind of sprinkled on top there. Almost as if those two shows had a love child. We even get a cameo by Amber Benson, who played Tara in Buffy. But aspects of this story within this TV show are definitely aimed at teens while kind of working in a little bit more serious aspects, very similar to both Buffy and Pete and Pete. But as life kind of changes around Owen as he grows up, you know, Maddie kind of goes missing for a while, and various other life changes brings like a direct audience presented series of bits of dialogue delivered to us to kind of fill us in on what's happening in his life. But while this first hour definitely feels like a standard but very entertaining and beautifully shot coming-of-age film, the underlying aspects of what's happening with Owen start to expand, and it gets very strange. Such as, where does this show end and the reality begin in Owen's mind? What happened to Maddie, and so forth. Now, first off, I really enjoyed the overall look and feel of this entire film, as well as these performances. You know, I loved seeing this connection build for Owen, and you know, I definitely recommend this film basically based off that mainly. You know, just it's beautifully shot, seeing that connection build, seeing him grow up, everything's great, but it does get very strange after that. A bit surreal, with a lot of symbolism and underlying themes of not just gender identity, but self-identity in general, which comes along with the usual identity ideas coming through one's head as they're kind of growing up and figuring themselves out. And then the ending, again, this is a non-spoiler part, but it is a bit strange. It's a bit of a downer, at least that's how I kind of interpreted it, and a lot of other people did. But there is some of it kind of open to interpretation. Interpretation definitely worth looking into, not just to see what others thought about it, but how they interpreted it. But, you know, just to see what the filmmaker really intended anyways. So that may catch you off guard, that ending. You know, that's the only negative thing I've heard from anybody, was that they didn't care for that or they didn't understand it. But other than that, you may enjoy it because the story they set up, the connection, the overall style. It's currently on HBO Max, and it's definitely more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, that was the non-spoiler stuff. Now that that's out of the way, I will put this banner back up. So if you don't want any potential spoilers, feel free to skip to the point where this banner is gone, or check out the movie and come back here and pick up where you left off. Okay, so now that all the non-spoiler stuff is out of the way, as far as spoiler stuff, just a little bit, mainly about the ending. The ending originally caught me very off guard, and I wasn't sure if I actually even liked that part of it. I had to kind of think back on it, read a few bits about interpretation. So if you've seen this, I would love to hear what your interpretation was, if you want to go ahead and sound off in the comments. Because this ending scene with Owen freaking out, looking in the mirror, seemed like he still had this obsession locked inside of him as he's cutting open his chest. Like, that's literally tearing him apart. Like he's hiding something for so long, for so much of his life, that he's kind of like the rest of his life is just wasting away around him. You know, looking into some of the interpretations, particularly directly related from the writer-director, it seems to lean more on being trans and hiding it, or being in denial of it. At least that's how I'm kind of interpreting what I've read about it. You know, a standard life being set, you know, getting married, buying a home, starting a family, and upgrading to that big TV, and yet looking back on that pink opaque show, seeing, you know, being more aged and seasoned by that point, that sad realization that it's not all you remembered it to be, that you've really changed by the time you look back on those shows. So I feel like with Owen, if I'm interpreting it right, he's kind of reflecting back on certain aspects of his life where he was really hiding and in denial and very shy, while everything else in his life is kind of wasting away around him. But it's definitely an interesting one to try to put yourself in his shoes. You know, what if you had to hide an aspect of yourself so much that you wither away like Owen does, because he starts looking by the end so old and so weak, and yet as he's freaking out and then opening up this part inside of him, you see that he still has this in him, and he just tucks it all back away, makes some apologies, and is shuffling back through life. It's kind of hard to explain. I don't know. I'm going to read into it more. So anyways, let me take down this banner. So now that the spoiler stuff is out of the way, about that weird ending, like I said, sound off in the comments. What are your thoughts and interpretations about this film? Did you read any articles about it or other interpretations and so forth? And with that, that's about all I have for this one. At the time of this video, as I said, I Saw the TV Glow is available on Max as well as paid rental. It's only about an hour and 40 minutes. It's classified as horror drama, but I would lean more towards drama sci-fi myself, but it's definitely worth a watch. Anyways, that about wraps everything up here. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, sound off in those comments, give me a like, and if not already subscribed, consider subscribing. I put up 1 to 3 videos a week, usually related to horror, sometimes 80s throwbacks, occasionally a newer film, such as this one. Just depends on what ideas I have to put up there. Anyways, be sure to check out my back catalog, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to another entry here, a rare one, as this is for a very new film which is just now hitting home rental, that being for the 2024 film Abigail, which is starring a great cast in that we have Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Kevin Durand, Catherine Newton, the late Angus Cloud, who you may know from Euphoria, and of course the amazing, and even though in a small role in this, Giancarlo Esposito. And the synopsis for Abigail is as follows. After a group of criminals kidnap the ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, they retreat to an isolated mansion, unaware that they are locked inside with no normal little girl. So first, this little girl, played by Alicia Weir, I was not familiar with her going into this, but she did an absolutely amazing job. But let's move on to the meat of this story. So this film definitely starts out as more of like a crime, kidnapping style caper in a way to begin with. You know, the abduction of the little girl from this mansion at night, getting away, meeting up at this creepy older mansion. We have a good introduction of our crew and Giancarlo, who's kind of organizing this kidnapping. No real names, no real info, just hang out here for the next 24 hours until you receive payment for this little girl. So, of course, we do have some small issues coming up. You know, nothing big, just small ones within the team, such as some personalities clashing, but really nothing major, as they try to avoid giving too much information about themselves. But some stuff does leak out here and there in a way which makes it easy for us to understand who these characters are, where they're coming from, without needing a very lengthy backstory for each. But then slowly and creepily we move forward with this 24 hours, and as the night goes on and they're exploring this mansion, some issues start to arise. You know, very creepy stuff with this place all broken down, dirty, in major disarray. And especially as the synopsis and trailer indicate that this little girl is not what she seems. You know, beyond her trying to get sympathy through some really good manipulation and through her intelligence and how she can play these characters against each other, there's something much darker happening with her and within this house. Now, as usual, I'm trying to avoid any major spoilers, so some of this might be a little bit vanilla and quick, but basically dealing with each other, the house, and this little girl escalates and escalates until they are literally in a fight for survival. They're trying to get through to morning as you realize that those behind this situation are likely linked to this crime syndicate in a way where they had heard previous tales of ones who had gone up against this syndicate and how gruesome their fate was. You know, that no matter what happens, they are far from safe throughout this night, and even if they eventually kind of come to the realization that if they weren't locked in, they would be up for just leaving. Stuck out, screw the money, get out of the situation. That's how terrified they are about a potential gruesome fate. But they're locked in. Now, as this was a bigger release than some of the other films I've been coming across recently on streaming, it has a much bigger, more polished feel to it. You know, one comparison I would make is maybe to the Samara Weaving film Ready or Not. We have a bigger budget and release, some scary stuff, but it does feel a little bit more like a mystery and thriller for most of it. Until, you know, not much really frightening horror so much as we do get a lot more action coming out and a lot more gore in that it does not skimp on the blood, and it only uses the digital effects when it's really necessary to kind of amplify the scene, which literally just made me want to take a shower afterwards. Some of it was so disgusting. But what this movie does well is the pacing and how they kind of lay out the cards and bring the story through. We get the kidnapping caper, we have the hiding out, the mystery starts to unfold, things get very violent, shock and awe, twists and turns, and a very satisfying ending to this with all those twists that definitely makes it more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest video for Abigail, which at the time of this video is just about to hit Blu-ray. I believe if I release this on Monday, the Blu-ray's coming out on Tuesday. There's also supposed to be a lower digital rental cost around that same time. And these days, you know, for all we know, it's also popping up on a streaming service that you already have access to. So check around if it sounds interesting. Anyways, That's about all that I got for this one. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually 1 to 3 times a week. That's all I got, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to a new entry for a film I got out to see last week, one which was on my radar to check out for a while. I'd heard it mentioned on a couple podcasts, I think 2 within the same day, and I decided to get out, put some money down for the movie directly by going to the theater, and some money down at concession to help out the theater themselves by checking out The Substance from 2024. Now, this one is starring Demi Moore, who needs no introduction really, as well as Dennis Quaid, who I remember being quite big in the 80s and 90s, but haven't heard that much about recently, and Margaret Qualley, who I am mainly familiar with from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but she also had a smaller role in Poor Things later last year. And the synopsis for this film is as follows. A fading celebrity takes a black market drug, a cell-replicating substance that temporarily creates a younger, better version of herself. So, as usual, I will go over the vanilla, the top surface, the stuff from the trailers, which won't spoil anything from the film, before later on putting up this banner here, which will be where I get into a little bit deeper into this. Just if there's anything I want to mention that may be considered spoilers. But, anyways, to start out, one can see why having Demi Moore in this film was a good choice, seeing as she's lived through some major, retirement of actresses once they hit their mid-30s kinds of issues that we've seen. And even though she's looking great, the character she's playing is, supposed to be replaced as she just turned, I believe, 50 in the film. And this is where Dennis Quaid comes in as this really lecturous, sleazy producer, giving off some major Weinstein kind of vibes here. It's just gross as he's letting her go. But this opportunity comes along for our lead there, having a younger version of herself in a way, which she pursues. But there are catches. So to go through this process with this substance, you can be young for 7 days, and then you need to reset and be your usual self for 7 days. And you need to do that staying on that schedule. Along with that, there are other things like other instructions which need to be followed in order to kind of ensure that that switch is going to happen safely and effectively and there's not going to be any negative side effects. And there's this creepy reminder that they both are you, considering this young version of yourself and your current day version of yourself. It's technically still you, and you have to keep that in mind as there may be almost like battling personalities in a way. But anyways, this is where Margaret Qualley comes in, and she's playing kind of like the younger version of Demi Moore's character. And, as this younger version, she's kind of balancing the time, like Margaret versus Demi, getting this new career going, and all the fame and adoration that comes to it, and then having to switch back to being Demi Moore's character for a week. But remember those downsides, those catches. Having to keep up with the schedule and so on. Things don't necessarily go smoothly. The overall feelings during this film were very interesting because in one way it was great to see older women in Hollywood being portrayed in a very raw way, which hopefully makes them and their struggles feel a bit more seen. It calls attention to how the industry works. Even though there have been some really great strides in recent years making things a bit better, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still much further where things need to go. There's this heightened sense of vulnerability within it, seeing Demi Moore's character judging herself in the mirror, not liking what she sees, and having some scenes with this full frontal nudity in a way which is anything but sexual, but more exposing of herself, and just seeing like this raw nerd, that nakedness being both literal and figurative within what's going on in this story as she's going down this path with this substance. There are also some very frustrating parts of her character's journey, as well as Margaret's, as one can't help but to think of them as like these separate characters in a way, and that they're each kind of handling what's happening in their life very differently. And it's difficult for the characters as well as the viewers to just hold on to that reminder that they are both the one character. But though this is hitting Mubi, a service I wasn't very familiar with, I think on Halloween, just some caution before going in if you decide to tune in on Halloween and check it out. First, It's kind of long for the subject matter, clocking in at about 2 hours and 21 minutes, so these dramatic aspects and the slow rise and fall really takes you on a long journey. Second, it is very graphic in various ways. While, from what I recall, the violence really only comes from one major scene in it, in my opinion, the transformation is what really does it. What it takes to use a substance, go through the transformation, keep up with all the tasks you need to do is really gross. Only being pushed really like over the edge during the last 30 minutes, things get really crazy. Think something along the lines of like those very grotesque aspects of a film like Society, perhaps. Body horror to an extent that I found it more nauseating than anything I'd seen in Terrifier 3 when I went to see that a week earlier. But it has the story and performances that makes everything feel balanced with those very grotesque scenes, with those extreme aspects of it, which in this case simply adds to the film in a positive way, which makes it more than worth checking out. Okay, but now that we're done with that surface aspect, let's put up this little banner here. So if interested, check out the film, come back here to this point to watch the rest of it, or if you've already seen it or don't care about spoilers, you can stick around and we dive into just a little bit more detail here, stuff that I didn't want to put during the non-spoiler stuff. But anyways, so for that detail, while I was grossed out by a lot of this, it's while creepy seeing her kind of mess up with this stabilizer growing, that old finger of hers, or the extreme mismanagement of the process causing the spinal fluid, like stabilizing juice stuff, to kind of turn black and rotten. That was really disgusting, but it really reminded me of Jared Leto in Requiem for a Dream, showing this addiction taking somebody so far that they'll do anything to keep it going, as she is quite literally being addicted to being young and successful. But that suspense on what will happen to our Matrix, to Demi Moore's character, after being off schedule for so long, was really nerve-wracking, wondering what's going to happen if she keeps pushing this and pushing this and pushing this, as that fluid's getting more and more corrupted and gross. And it really ends up turning, in my opinion, the film into something very heartbreaking, akin to like the Elephant Man at parts, especially some of the really on-the-nose parts about Elephant Man toward the end at the awards show. But even as silly as the fully transformed and corrupted version can look, stumbling down the street with a picture on their face, and how outlandishly gross things get with the blood spraying everywhere at that award ceremony, and tiny bits of her face kind of oozing away, it really, to me, came across as extremely sad and tragic. So I heard some talk about this film on the Colors of the Dark podcast as I was catching up on some older episodes, and then I just heard it mentioned on the Armchair Expert podcast as well, where Dax Shepard noted he's not really much of a horror fan, but from working in the industry, working in Hollywood, he really enjoyed this one, despite it being a bit more gross than he's used to, even when it comes to horror. But anyways, I really felt like this one was a real tragedy that kind of stuck with me more than just like the graphic gore aspects or body horror in this one. Okay, so back to taking down that non-spoiler stuff there. As a recap, really cool concept. Sad seeing a representation of what aging actresses kind of go through in Hollywood. We had some really great performances, which I hope get the notice that they deserve, and this one's more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest little entry here for The Substance from 2024, which at the time of this video is about to be released on Mubi. I thought about getting a trial and checking it out on Halloween when it drops, but I opted for just heading out to the theater anyways, and I was pleasantly surprised with this one. But anyways, that's all I have for this one. If you enjoyed this one, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually 1 to 3 times a week. That's all I got for this one. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. So I originally wasn't going to put up a video this Wednesday because obviously there's a lot of stuff happening in the news which is getting a lot more attention, but then I figured I may as well put up something in case somebody wants a way to escape all that and have something to watch. So here is a Wednesday night video here, which is for another show recommendation to throw your way. I usually stick with film, but occasionally a show comes along that I want to make a video about and share, something that I really enjoyed. Sometimes it goes pretty well, such as Interview the Vampire, Fall of the House of Usher, or even Reginald the Vampire. All those videos did pretty well, even though Reginald was canceled. And sometimes the videos don't do that well, such as the one I did for Dispatches from Elsewhere, which, just like the show, my video failed to really find an audience, but I will link to that one at the end. Anyways, so these days I've been a bit troubled by enjoying a show, such as Reginald the Vampire, or even Chucky, and having it canceled, often on a cliffhanger. But for this entry, it feels like the story is kind of wrapped up. Like we could get a season 2, but I'm satisfied with what they did with these 8 episodes, which were just released a few weeks ago, and that is for Hysteria. From just a couple weeks ago, 2024, this one stars the likes of, among others, MJ Anthony, who you may remember from Krampus, Anna Camp, who I'm mainly familiar with from True Blood, and Bruce Campbell from Bruce Campbell. I mean, hail to the chin, baby. Anyways, there are others in this cast, but those are the ones that kind of stuck out the most for me for this show, which the synopsis for this show is as follows. Hysteria follows a struggling high school heavy metal band of outcasts who use the town's sudden interest in the occult to start a reputation as a satanic metal band, until a strange series of events triggers a witch hunt that leads back to them. So, taking place in the late 80s, this one kind of grabs hold of some of those, that satanic panic that was going on at the time surrounding heavy metal, or actually just any kind of rock in general seemed to have that finger pointed at it from what I can recall from back then. I really tried to focus on this one. I wanted to make sure to put my phone away, don't get caught up on checking various actors on IMDb and seeing where I know them from. I just wanted to take this all in and enjoy it, and I really did. Now, as the synopsis says, this band decides to lean into the satanic panic aspects and all this talk circulating around town. With this persona that they're putting on at school, fake rituals and cult-like stuff to just get a following for their band and finally get some notice. All of this for the sake of fame. But slowly some events are happening in the town, such as a kidnapping, a supposed real cult, and some other kind of spooky activities are starting to happen. So basically they play with fire and they get burned, and as this town starts to eventually turn on them as possibly the cause of all this panic that's happening. And as fear just starts to spread. But as they get kind of deeper and deeper into trouble in this town, something strange is unfolding, and I would say around 4 or 5 episodes in, we get a lot of these mysteries kind of opening up even more, giving us some backstory to some of these characters as far as like how they kind of became who they are, what happened during certain flashback scenes. And one of those flashbacks, actually, one of the ones that we have, gets some nice cameos from none other than Barbara Crampton and Jeffrey Combs of From Beyond and Reanimator fame, among others. So it's kind of like a little bit of a reunion there. But anyways, it takes a few episodes to build as expected, about 2 to 3, but it flows really well. And then at around 4, it starts to dump a lot on you. And then by 5, I ended up actually rewatching episode 5 just to make sure that I took it all in. It kind of rounds things out eventually after that with a really nice ending as they wrap it all up. But as for how the 80s are kind of portrayed in this film, it was done really well. They hit the 80s style without going too much into like a caricature kind of route. They kept it more realistic than, what I've seen in some other 80s based films and TV shows. We had the overall style and vibe, but not the highly amplified, super neon, hypercolor craziness that we see in a lot of films and TV shows, which go for a little bit more parody. And as for Bruce Campbell specifically, he's one who I often see in roles that are a bit more silly, leaning into his performance as being very comedic, something that he's done very well. But this one was a little bit different and very fresh of a role for me to see with him, because as the town sheriff, he plays this much more seriously compared to what I usually associate him with, and I've seen him, be like that before. Let's say even in Bubba Hotep, it had a lot of dramatic aspects to his role in that. And in Hysteria, his character kind of brings a level of sanity between a panicking population worried about what's happening with this supposed Satanism in town, along with just understanding that these are kids being kids trying to do stuff for attention and fame and popularity. So he's the one who's kind of like investigating everything that's happening in this town as we start seeing these little events unfold. This group of kids get into more and more trouble. The plot of like kidnapping and it just really gets out of control, but he's the one kind of trying to hold it all together as everything is spreading. Now, as I've heard others mention, they are hoping for a season 2, and even Anna Camp had mentioned this on the Screen Dreams podcast recently, that she was hoping for a second season. But personally, I feel this one wrapped up really well, and even to the point where I could see rewatching it next year around Halloween. And, while there is a little bit of comedy in there, thrown in here and there, for the most part, it takes itself pretty seriously as we see these spooky happenings going on, the results of these kidnappings and what happened during them, and this panic just spreading throughout the town. It's a really creepy horror mystery inspired by the satanic panic of the 80s with some great performances, and is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick little video recommendation here for Hysteria, which is currently on Peacock. It is a Peacock original. Everybody in this one does a great job. I feel it's wrapped up the loose ends, but who knows, maybe we will get another season one day, and it'll be interesting to see what they want to bring to the table to kind of continue the story. Anyways, that's all I have for this quick little entry here. Be on the lookout for some links coming up in just a moment. If you enjoyed this content, please give me a thumbs up, and if not already subscribed, consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is typically 1 to 3 times a week, especially if you can hop in within that first hour of it dropping, as it really does help out quite a bit. Anyways, that is all I have for this one. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you in the next one.
And now that I have your attention, I'll begin.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. I have a rare entry here, as I usually stick to making videos about films I enjoy and want to share, in that this is going to be for a show instead. I think the only other times that I've covered shows have been where I did Interviewed the Vampire and The Fall of the House of Usher, both of those late last year. Technically, I guess you could say The Last Drive-In is more of a show, even though they present movies. That was also from about a year before that. And a few months ago, covering Reginald the Vampire, which sadly has been canceled, so just forget about that one. But anyways, for this entry, the show I wanted to cover is Dispatches from Elsewhere from 2020. This was an AMC show, which I watched in the early days of the pandemic. I believe this came out in April of 2020. I'd rushed through it back then, watching every episode as quickly as possible. I loved it, and I was finally able to revisit this show. Now, this one stars and is also created by Jason Segel. It also stars Eve Lindley, Sally Field, Andre Benjamin, and Richard E. Grant. But what is this show about? Well, it's kind of an interesting one, but I'm going to cover 2 things. First is going to be Dispatches from Elsewhere, and then the other one is going to be The Institute, which is a documentary that kind of inspired this. So the synopsis for Dispatches from Elsewhere is as follows. Feeling as though there's something missing in their lives, 4 ordinary people stumble across a puzzle hiding just beyond the veil of everyday life, and their eyes are opened to a world of possibility and magic. Now, as I said, this was created by Jason Segel, as inspired by the documentary film from 2012 called The Institute, and I will get into that a little bit later. But for Dispatches from Elsewhere, as the synopsis says, these characters kind of feel like there's something missing from their lives. It focuses initially on Segel's character, Peter, before bringing in all of the others. Now, we also get episodes which focus on each one of those characters to really open them up along the way in this story, which is about kind of like an augmented reality mystery taking place in real-world Philadelphia, kind of like a scavenger hunt or something along those lines. So they've been seeing these strange flyers for projects that need volunteers to test, such as a memory to media, where your memories can be recorded for you, a dolphin communication device, a personal force field. Our characters, initially the Peter character, give into their curiosity to see what these seemingly absurd flyers for these crazy inventions that seem impossible actually even involve. Now, upon showing up to the headquarters, where you're going to learn about these projects and get involved with them, something appears kind of strange to be set in motion, where aspects of what feel like a game, almost like the feel you would have in an escape room, are being played out in the real world, just as walking down the street, outside of the office, out on the street in Philadelphia. So Clues are left about to follow, people to speak little code words, almost like a scavenger hunt, which is where he meets our character Simone, played by Eve Lindley, and they are kind of at the same point in the game. Now, there are gaps, of course. You know, they learn of something, there's a gap, they don't get anything else for a little while. They're kind of out of the game for a little bit, and then they will receive a phone call or some other communication with a new mission to embark on, one which leads these two characters to a park with hundreds of other people playing this game, using the same clues, trying to find their little groups of people to team up with. And this is where they find the rest of their team, which is where we have Janice, who's played by Sally Field, and Fredwin, played by Andre Benjamin. That's where they come into it. So now we have our group of 4 people from 4 different walks of life trying to figure this mystery out. Simone, of course, is thinking it's just a game with a prize at the end. It's going to be great to see what that prize is. Fredwin being the analytical one who thinks it's like a government experiment of some sort, that they're being monitored, and he's very distrustful. And then there's Janice, who's just happy to have a fun connection with others, even though she might kind of consider this to be almost like a prank in a way. But then there's Peter, who's wondering, what if it's all real? You know, this whole story that they're being told involving these other operatives and other factions and a missing girl named Clara who they need to be found. What if it's all real? So you have these different points of view as they're kind of following the clues and going on this real world mystery. So the show's a lot of fun because we get to kind of follow all these characters through this mystery, wondering if each one is right in their assumptions as we get our episodes focusing on each one of them, so we kind of understand why they are the way that they are. We get to like kind of feel their curiosity unfold, seeing their connections grow with each other, and really connect with them as we get some really heartfelt details about each one of them coming to the forefront. Every character in our group is, this being Peter, Fredwin, Simone, and Janice, are very likable and relatable, even for their faults. Even if not specifically relating to that fault that you have it yourself, or that they have it themselves, they are brought to screen in such a way where you can at least understand what that fault is and how the world is for them. And it just really helps you connect with them and be fully on board with the story and wanting to know where these characters are going and if everybody's going to be okay. I feel like it is through those faults where we really, where they really connect with each other, let's say. So Simone may not understand Peter's faults, his nervousness, his hang-ups, his anxiety, and he definitely doesn't understand hers, but they recognized what is there and how to work with it since they would want the same back for them. Even Fredwin, who is, apt to like overanalyze, get way too passionate, and think of himself justifiably as better in some intellectual ways than the others on his team, but he's still treated with respect and such grants others that as well. And even Janice, being kind of like the old lady of the group. They can't understand specifically what it's like to be her, but they respect her, they care about her, and so on, because she's the same way towards all of them. They really bond very quickly. So revisiting this one, within that first episode, I knew I wouldn't be able to stretch it out. My plan was to maybe watch an episode every couple days, but I ended up finishing all 10 episodes on this rewatch within about 4 days. I even remember a little bit about the ending going into it, because that's part of it that might be a little bit divisive. Because everything in this show pretty much follows a specific format in the story for the first 6 or 7 episodes. They're getting clues, we're learning about the characters, they're slowly investigating and uncovering this mystery. It gets very creative, very inspirational, but then it shifts and shifts until when the game that they're playing is coming to an end, we still have an extra episode or 2 wrapping things up as far as where these characters find themselves after all is said and done. And some really meta, like fourth wall breaking aspects thrown in, especially toward that last episode, which many may not care for. But going in with the expectation of that shift towards the end, as they're getting toward the end of this mystery, you may still enjoy it better than some did on their first viewing, not knowing what to expect with that ending. Because all these characters are given enough screen time and detail to really unfold, aside from just the mystery itself, which is already really interesting. The overall journey for these characters make it more than worth checking out. And wait, I'm not done yet. I'm not doing my usual, and speaking of checking out just yet, it's also worth tracking down The Institute from 2012. This is a documentary which inspired the show, for which the synopsis for this documentary is as follows. A documentary on the Jejune Institute, a mind-bending San Francisco phenomenon where 10,000 people became inducted without ever quite realizing what they had signed up for. So it turns out, of course, that this was a real game setup, just in a different city. But much of what this documentary kind of references is reproduced, almost certain scenes exactly, from Dispatches from Elsewhere, with the real aspects being pretty much everything about these inventions listed on these flyers, showing up and being kind of inducted and pulled into this game, all the stuff in the real world, everything about the mystery really happened. And this documentary covers what this social scavenger hunt / mystery investigation game was. We get to know kind of like who created it and why, who all was involved with this project, who followed it, kind of like our characters did in the show, and what it meant to them. If you think Jason Segel watching this documentary and deciding to write a story about 4 characters in that situation, just kind of changing the location to Philadelphia. Now, I was very surprised with this documentary because so many aspects of what really happened was worked into the show, like I said, and it was great to see the real people interviewed about their experience, how they handled it, the fun and frustration that they had, how their lives, or at least their outlook on life, for some of them, had changed after it was all done, and how the creators really had a hard time deciding on how to end this little social game of theirs in a satisfying way as it had been going on for so long. It'd be hard to please everyone. Similar to not just how Dispatches from Elsewhere kind of had to wrap things up and had a hard time doing that, but a lot of longer running shows. Think Game of Thrones, or Lost, or Battlestar Galactica, or so on. Any of these really long shows, which people invest years in, there's bound to be people let down when you finally get to an ending being presented to you. So now I watched The Institute literally the morning after I finished watching Dispatches from Elsewhere, and even after being so close to finishing Dispatches, seeing so many similarities brought from that doc into the show, the doc was also more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out my little show and documentary review for Dispatches from Elsewhere from 2020, which at the time of this video is available on AMC Plus and is available on the Blu-ray, which is what I scooped up for about $13, well worth the money. And The Institute from 2012, which at the time of this video is available on Tubi, Hoopla, Vudu, Pluto TV, plus a lot of paid rental services. Both are definitely worth the watch, and Dispatches from Elsewhere is one which I just don't really hear much about these days. I didn't hear much back then, and I don't hear now, and I really do feel that it deserves a lot of notice. In this day and age, with a lot of shows getting a season or two, sometimes leaving us on a cliffhanger and then getting canceled, such as Reginald the Vampire, The Acolyte, 1899, even Willow. It's very interesting how they put these shows out, they want us to watch them, we start watching them, and then they cancel them. It's very frustrating. But sometimes there's shows like this one where you have one single season that tells the entire story. So it's definitely worth checking it out and really getting wrapped up in it, because you're going to have a beginning, middle, and end all wrapped up nicely. No cliffhanger, no cancellation. It's simply done. But anyways, like I said, they're more than worth checking out. We got Dispatches from Elsewhere on AMC Plus and on Blu-ray, and we have The Institute available on a lot of different free streaming services such as Tubi, Hoopla, Vudu, and Pluto TV. Anyways, that's all that I have for this one. Thanks for coming by and sticking around to the end, as it really does help out a lot. I know this is a very different kind of video, but if you are not already subscribed, please consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is anywhere from 1 to 3 times a week, usually on Mondays and Fridays. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to a rarity of mine, an entry which isn't about a film, but it's about a show. And yes, I know I usually cover horror films a lot of the time, and 80s films, especially ones that I don't really hear a lot about these days, and not much TV. Usually this is because a show may go on for years and years, and it's just hard to know even when to make a video about it, but sometimes I put one up anyways. Such as a few years back, I did one for The Last Drive-In, which I will link to at the end of this video, as well as sometime last year, I did one for the first season of Interview with the Vampire. And continuing off that, we got another vampire one here, which is for the currently running show, which is about to finish its second season, Reginald the Vampire, starring Jacob Batalon, Mandela Van Peebles, and Emily Hain, amongst others. Now, you may know Jacob from the Tom Holland, no, for once, not this Tom Holland, for once, that Tom Holland, those Tom Holland Spider-Man films. So he plays our lead in this as Reginald in this show, for which the synopsis is as follows. In a world populated by beautiful, fit, and vain vampires, Reginald tumbles into it as an unlikely hero who will navigate every kind of obstacle and discovers he has a few unrecognized powers of his own. Yes, fit vampires, which is important because this is actually based off a series of novels titled Fat Vampire. And now as the title of this video contains the phrase, "Yet again I was wrong," this is because I've been kind of overly critical of shows when they're announced. I just kind of shrug a lot of them off. There's so much content to watch anyways. So I was like this initially when we first heard about some of the Star Wars shows starting out, like The Mandalorian and Obi-Wan and so forth. It was like that with Interview with the Vampire, all of the Marvel shows, Chucky, you know, and with this one, my initial thought was, well, it's a comedic vampire show. I already have What We Do in the Shadows, and I love it. Why do I even need this show? So I'll just skip it. So I just kind of ignored it for a while. But like all of those shows, I was wrong. Again, I was wrong because I ended up really enjoying it. Now, I don't remember what I was, you know, watching, like what I'd finished at the time that had me looking for something new to watch. Acolyte is still going. Doctor Who was mid-season at the time that I started watching this. But I think it's because I kept seeing Sci-Fi, the channel that runs this, running a lot of ads on social media, the same way that they do for both Chucky and Resident Alien, two other shows that I really enjoy. So I just decided to go ahead and pop on Hulu and give this a try. You know, give it the old 3-episode try of a show, see if I like it. I made it about maybe halfway through that first episode before I knew I was at least going to see this first season through to the end and see if I enjoyed it, which I did. And then I already started catching up on season 2. Now, as for the specifics as to why I'm recommending this show, so it's a extremely odd mix of comedy, drama, and horror. You know, the closest I might be able to compare it to is perhaps Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was another one that I thought was a really bad idea. And then years after it was on, I think somewhere on the 4th season, I finally started giving that one a try, got hooked, and really loved it. And like Buffy and, you know, pretty much any show in its pilot episode, you know, that first episode is just there to kind of give you the hook and the idea of what that show is. It's definitely not going to be the best representation for what that show eventually develops into. I always consider pilots are always going to be the worst that show probably shows. So if I enjoy it in any way, you just go ahead and continue on. But in this first episode, we have our initial pilot setup. So we have Reginald, who's working at this slushy place. He's in love with a coworker, very dissatisfied with his life in some very like depressing ways, like what some of his like speeches are about himself and trying to like, you know, get some of his, I don't know, some of his zest back for life and everything. It's really sad. And this vampire kind of comes into his life. Seeing his desire for this girl that he works with and his depression about life, he glamours him. You know, a little mind control like they do in True Blood and other vampire stories too. Finally gets to ask this girl out on a date. You know, just cheer up, go for it, and see what happens. So all is well and fine. But some situations happen, and again, I'm going to avoid some spoilers, so some of this may be kind of vanilla, but some situations happen which lead to Reginald becoming a vampire himself, which is problematic because now he is not only going to have to adjust to this new life or this new being, but he will be, as he states, dealing with perpetual body image issues for all of eternity, because his body won't change and he won't age. Now, at the time of this video, we are about 2 to 3 episodes left in this second season. I'm eagerly awaiting those, but from what I've seen so far up to this point, I really feel like I have a gem of a show here. You know, that mix of the comedy, drama, and horror continues throughout. Some outright silly situations, just really laughable, such as him, you know, dealing with the sensitivity to light, you know, trying to learn how to even feed and trying to hold down this job while keeping up with kind of trying to get with that girl that he likes. Plus, as others are kind of catching on that there's something different about him, there's all these other subplots starting to develop. And, you know, really with him trying to be with that girl, that's an issue because he's a vampire and she's not, and that may just not work. But we also have the dangers of other vampires in this story. So besides his maker, we have others that are in the area, the weird vampire politics and everything of this mysterious town called Akron, Ohio. So yeah, they set it in a very interesting little slumbering kind of town, the way that it's all set up. And with that, he's got a bully of a coworker that he has to deal with. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on. And it's not really just about what Reginald's going through, but also situations that his maker is dealing with as well, because he kind of made this vampire when he wasn't supposed to. He's in a lot of hot water over this, and they're going to have to deal with that. So that's kind of what our first season is about, is him being created and having to deal with the aftermath of turning this guy who should not have been turned, and how they're going to deal with that both politically and how Jacob's going, or how Reginald is going to deal with this, trying to learn to be a vampire and balance his other life. But what's really weird about this is not just how they kind of balance that comedy, horror, and drama, as I've seen other shows like Buffy again do that, or I've seen the action sci-fi drama on things like either Firefly or Battlestar Galactica, and of course Firefly having a lot more comedy thrown in there as well. But it's also how some of that drama comes across, how heartfelt it comes out on this show, especially for how short of a time it takes to, not just for some of those moments to kind of play out and set themselves up, but for them to actually work. I've seen a lot of films and shows where they throw something dramatic and heartfelt my way, but I'm not invested in the characters or in the story enough to really care. But to be clear with this one, I've only seen 17 out of the available episodes, and there are 20 planned, as we get through the end of the second season. But, even in that first episode, Reginald really pulled me in, his life, his coworkers, his friends, and everything. Each character was either likable enough to really invest in, or they were interesting enough to invest in that you wanted to find out more about them and see where the story's going to go, or how the theme for that first season, dealing with him becoming a vampire, how that's going to play out. As they kind of build upon these characters and situations in ways which somehow never feel padded, and somehow also doesn't feel rushed at the same time. But at any rate, I'm making this video because I'm really enjoying this show, despite my initial knee-jerk reaction to dismiss it and avoid it, because yet again I was wrong, and this one is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest little video here for Reginald the Vampire, which at the time of this video, that first season is on Hulu, and both the first and second are on Sci-Fi Channel. I believe it's on their app if you have access to it, which is where it also plays live. I believe Sci-Fi Channel plays that live in the US on Wednesday nights at 10. But it really depends on if it's going to move to another service, of course. So other shows like Chucky and Resident Evil have moved on to other services. Some of them are on Netflix, some are on Peacock, so be sure to keep up on apps like Just Watch, see if you can track down where those are going to be. So far, I don't know where Season 2 is going to be after it's done running. It may pop into Hulu, or maybe they'll put it all onto Peacock for all we know. Too many subscriptions to keep track of. Anyways, that's all I have for this one. Thanks for coming by and for sticking around to the end. I have those links coming up in just a moment for those 2 other shows that I reviewed. If you enjoy this content, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually anywhere from 1 to 3 times a week. That's all I got for this one. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one. Here's my shirt. Joe Bob Briggs is a close, personal friend of mine. So some backstory here. Let's have a quick little chat here about the drive-in, more specifically the last drive-in, not meaning the last one in existence, but the last drive-in with Joe Bob Briggs, which is on that streaming service Shudder that I've spoken about in a few other reviews here and there. I've been enjoying this one for quite a while, so I figured I would at least do a little review here to kind of show that appreciation and explain a little bit about why I like it as much as I do. So to go into the backstory I was talking about, Joe Bob Briggs is a host I became familiar with back in the later half of the 80s, staying up late at night and, clicking through the dial, which, an actual dial on the cable boxes when they had these little dials with like 36 stations on it, and you could put a little card in there to kind of like hack it and get some channels in and everything. But yeah, I used to watch him on the movie channel back in the late 80s. He was not my first host, of course. I grew up with a bit of Elvira. I mean, who didn't grow up with having, some viewings of Elvira on the occasional late night, as well as a local host to where I grew up named Dr. Paul Bearer. His was more of like an afternoon kind of thing where, he would host something, I think it was Saturday afternoons or Sunday afternoons. And occasionally the USA Up All Night as well. So, this is back in the day before DVRs or streaming. So I would make it a point to check out anything new that I would come across. Somewhere along the way, I stumbled across Joe Bob and enjoyed it so much that even now, years later, there are little bits of segments and commentary that he made that I still remember now, decades later. Eventually, he ended up on TNT for a bit. But like all good things, it had to come to an end. And we kind of lost him for a bit there. But now just knowing that little bit of backstory, let's flash forward a little bit to the streaming days, New providers were coming along left and right, some with like a cheesy catalog of stuff that no other company really wanted or cared about the rights. Some of them were commercial based, so you see those same commercials over and over again, and aren't really worth much time. But slowly we started getting some more providers out there. One of the providers, having a better catalog here and there, and then another one would end up having some of those same things, and it wasn't exclusive, and it was just a mess. But eventually some of these companies started to even things out and realize what they have access to and what they can try to promote. So during that time, I was at the Spooky Empire convention, one of my favorite horror movie or horror franchise conventions ever, and I came across this table that was set up for this new service called Shudder. So Shudder, of course, is based on all horror and thriller, and everything within that horror and thriller genre, even like a horror comedy or action horror, a little bit of sci-fi or B-movie in there. Just kind of seasoned on top of that horror and thriller aspect. And, it was a new service, is being heavily promoted. Now, I grew up in the days of, like I said, hacking cable boxes and VHS rentals. I remember spending many a weekend or even a sick day watching horror movies. I still remember the 666 deals, which were 6 movies for 6 days for $6. So hearing about Shudder being all horror related was right up my alley. But they also gave me a good incentive there. They gave me a free month at the time, and they gave me some cool horror subgenre themed buttons, and got some socks. Yeah, some Shudder socks for my big old meaty legs. Anyways, checked it out, really enjoyed their content, and as they were becoming more and more established, they had this really great announcement that they were finding a way to bring Joe Bob Briggs back so he could do a show, on Shudder, which is going to be great, called The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. So sure, time ravages us all as we creep closer and closer to our impending demise, but I felt like I was right back into those late nights from years ago, snacking the night away, staying up late, watching a hosted film. In fact, to back up a little bit here, there was a point where I had let my Shudder subscription lapse, and because I love horror, but sometimes I just need to take a break and go into another genre for a bit. But then when I heard that Joe Bob was coming back, I specifically got my subscription back just because of his show. So another important thing here I want to mention before going into any more detail here is not only was Joe Bob coming back for this show, but he's having this co-host Darcy the Mail Girl, who's going to be dealing with, emails and tweets, all the social media stuff, as well as offering some of her own commentary, to the films, as well as, some great banter back and forth with Joe Bob as well. And so she has an extensive film and television history, well over 120 titles or so, and she's been a longtime fan of the genre, has some great comedic timing, so funny, smart, and really beautiful. Got me on board with this show. So now they've given a little tiny bit of that history of the show. Let me tell you about the actual show, which is movies, usually horror or thriller based. Sometimes we see some of those subgenres within or some B movies in there. For example, I've seen a mix of things on there. I've seen him host Train to Busan, Reanimator, The Love Witch, Maniac Cop, Fried Berry, which I have a review up for, Wolf Cop I saw recently, Prom Night 2, Hello Mary Lou, and there was a Christmas holiday special where most of the Phantasm films they got the rights to show, so it was just one long night of Phantasm movie after Phantasm movie. They did something similar with some of the Hellraiser movies as well. But so before the show, actually starts, before the movie starts, Joe Bob makes his introduction. He gives some info about the film, and he has his drive-in totals where he kind of goes through a list of different things to look out for within the film. And there are always funny things that he's picked out. At several sort of almost like commercial break length breaks throughout the film, Joe Bob will pop back in and give some additional interesting information about the film, or what was happening in the industry at the time. Some really detailed and random stuff that's also very interesting. So, of course, Darcy will have some additional tidbits to bring in, like I said before, and just like I said before, her back and forth with Joe Bob is great. But in my opinion, where Darcy really shines is on social media, particularly Twitter. You see, one does not simply queue up an episode of this show. You tune in live on a Friday night, you open up Twitter, you follow Darcy or Joe Bob, Shudder, The Last Drive-In hashtag, the Mutant fam, where us viewers can kind of comment along with the show, and kind of chatting throughout, see what Darcy's posting, what Shudder's posting. Puts you in this great circle that feels almost like family in a way, to be hanging out with everybody on a Friday night. I mean, all these mutants are online at the same time, there to enjoy the same thing. It's a great community to tread into, much like horror itself, as, in my experience, like I said about the mutants online, it feels more, more like a family to be into horror or cult. Probably cult. Anyways, even if there is a movie, which, I'd already seen, whether it'd been a few months or even just, a week or two before, I'll still tune in to check it out because I want to see what's going on with the commentary online, what they're talking about during those little breaks in the film. Get that whole experience with watching it that way. It, really makes for a great Friday evening at home. And now that, as of tonight, posting this video, we're on the last episode for this season. I'm seriously going to be missing this because I've just gotten so used to connecting with people on a Friday night this way. But, at least have some back episodes on Shudder I can go through, as well as all the other content on Shudder. I mean, they really have a really good library on there. But that's just a little bit that I wanted to give about this show, a little quick review about Joe Bob Briggs on Shudder. Needless to say, I highly recommend it. And needless to say, my rating on this is going to be an A. Actually giving it a full-on A. Flat out A. Even if I already saw the movie, an A. Even if the movie they're showing sucks, because we'll be online making fun of it together, I'll always give it an A. But when you add in that online experience, tweeting along with other people, making jokes online, seeing what's going on, I'll bump that up to an A+ even, because it becomes more than just sitting down and watching a movie or a show. So that's about all I have. Check it out. Shudder usually has a free week or a free month associated with it. You could find a coupon somewhere. You can drop in, see if it's for you. And if so, the monthly charge is only about $6, I believe. They have a great catalog of content. Sometimes there are even deals that are discounted even more for like a full year subscription. Usually around Halloween, they have those in place. It's a good one to check out. Keep up the subscription for, especially with Joe Bob there. Hop on board, subscribe, and let's support this show and this service so the drive-in will never die. So thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that little bell icon for notifications since I don't post too frequently. Trying to get on a more set schedule. Share this around. Hit me up for my Venmo so you can donate $10,000 to me. I think that's one of the things that everybody tries to do to show support. I might be wrong on that. But just remember, we'll all miss Sherwood's little Eskimo. Let's just hope she's rubbing noses with Jesus. See you in the next one.